In the shadowy halls of Ashford Manor, a locked study hides a deadly secret. Lord Reginald Ashford is found poisoned, his brandy laced with cyanide. Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective, unravels a web of betrayal, greed, and love gone wrong. A hidden letter speaks of a forged document. A misplaced pen and ink smudge whisper clues, and a secret panel reveals the killer's path. As suspects, Lady Eleanor, desperate Henry, secretive Clara, cold Dr. Langston, loyal Margaret, cunning Carver, and timid Ella Sacklash. Poirot's traps tighten. In a heart-stopping showdown, one confession cracks the case, exposing a motive that shocks the manor. Will justice heal the wounds of this haunted house? Chapter 1. The invitation to Ashford Manor. The train rattled through the English countryside, its wheels clacking like a steady heartbeat. I sat across from Hercule Poirot, my old friend, in a cozy carriage compartment. The green fields outside, blurred past, dotted with sheep and stone walls. It was a fine summer evening in 1935, and we were headed to Ashford Manor, a grand old house tucked away in Kent. Poirot had received a letter from Lord Reginald Ashford, a rich man with a big name, asking him to come for a delicate matter. That was all Poirot would say about it, and I knew better than to push him. His sharp eyes, like a hawk's, were fixed on a small notebook, where he jotted down thoughts with his neat, fussy handwriting. Mon ami. Hastings, he said, not looking up, you are restless. Why do you fidget like a schoolboy? I laughed, caught out. I'm just curious, Poirot. You've been so quiet about this trip. What's this Lord Ashford like, and why does he need you? Poirot closed his notebook with a snap and twirled his moustache, a habit that meant he was thinking hard. Lord Ashford, he said, is a man of wealth and secrets. He does not write to Hercule Poirot for a simple chat over tea. No, no. There is something amiss at Ashford Manor, and we shall find out what it is. That was all he'd give me, so I leaned back and watched the countryside roll by. I'd known Poirot for years, and his knack for sniffing out trouble was uncanny. If he thought something was wrong, it probably was. I felt a tingle of excitement. A weekend at a fancy manor with a mystery to solve. That sounded like just the sort of thing to liven up a dull summer. We arrived at the little station of Ashford Vale as the sun dipped low, painting the sky pink and gold. A driver in a smart uniform waited for us, standing by a shiny black car. He tipped his cap and said, "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, I'm to take you to the manor." We climbed in, and the car purred along narrow lanes, past hedges and old oaks, until we reached the gates of Ashford Manor. The manor was a sight to behold, like something from a storybook. It was a huge, grey stone house with tall windows that glowed warmly in the dusk. Ivy clung to the walls, and the gardens stretched out in neat rows of roses and trimmed bushes. But as we stepped out of the car, I felt a chill, like the air held a secret. The place was beautiful, but it didn't feel welcoming. A butler, stiff as a board, met us at the door. "Welcome, gentlemen," he said, his voice flat. "Lord Ashford is expecting you." He led us through a grand hall with polished wood, floors and paintings of stern-looking men in old-fashioned clothes. A big staircase curved up to the second floor, and I could hear voices somewhere deeper in the house. We were shown into a drawing room where a group of people waited. The air was thick with tension, like before a storm. Lord Reginald Ashford stood by the fireplace, a tall man with silver hair and a sharp face. He looked about 60, with deep lines around his eyes, like he carried heavy worries. He shook Poirot's hand firmly. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings, thank you for coming," he said. His voice was deep, but there was a shake in it, like he was nervous. "I have a matter that needs your unique skills." Poirot bowed slightly. "I am at your service, monsieur, but perhaps you will tell me more." Lord Ashford glanced at the others in the room, and I followed his gaze. There was a young woman, maybe 30, with bright blonde hair and a fancy dress that shimmered in the firelight. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That must be Lady Eleanor Ashford. His wife, I thought. Next to her stood a young man with messy dark hair and a sulky look. Henry Ashford, the nephew, I guessed. A woman in a plain grey dress sat at a small desk, her fingers tapping nervously on a notebook. That would be Clara Beaumont, the secretary. A man with a doctor's bag at his feet, Dr. Victor Langston, leaned against the wall, his face sour. A stout woman in a black uniform, probably the housekeeper, Margaret Poole, stood near the door, her hands clasped tight. A man in a sharp suit, James Carver, puffed on a cigarette, looking bored, and a young maid, Eliza Thornton, hovered in the corner, her eyes darting around like a scared rabbit. Lord Ashford cleared his throat. "We'll discuss it after dinner," he said to Poirot. "For now, please, make yourselves at home." Dinner was a grand affair, served in a dining room with a long table covered in white linen. Crystal glasses sparkled under a chandelier, and the food roast beef, potatoes, and some fancy French dish Poirot approved of was delicious, but the mood was anything but cheerful. Henry barely spoke, just stabbed at his food. Lady Eleanor chatted about London parties, but her laugh was too loud, like she was trying to cover something up. Dr. Langston kept glancing at Lord Ashford, his jaw tight. Margaret bustled in and out, serving brandy and coffee, her face blank but her eyes sharp. James Carver talked business, complaining about a deal gone wrong, and I caught Lord Ashford frowning at him. Clara ate quietly, but I noticed her hands shake when she picked up her glass. Eliza, bringing in dessert, nearly dropped a plate when Henry snapped at her to hurry. Poirot, of course, watched it all. His eyes flicked from one person to the next, like he was reading a book only he could see. I leaned over and whispered, "What do you make of this crowd?" He smiled, just a little. "They are not happy, mon ami. Each one hides something. But what? That is the question." After dinner, Lord Ashford asked Poirot and me to join him in his study. It was a cosy room with dark wood walls, a big desk, and shelves stuffed with books. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a decanter of brandy sat on a side table. Lord Ashford locked the door behind us, which made my stomach twist. Why the secrecy? "Mr. Poirot," he began, sitting behind his desk, "I fear for my life." I nearly choked on my brandy. Poirot, calm as ever, leaned forward. "Explain, monsieur." Lord Ashford's hands trembled as he spoke. "I've made enemies. Business. Deals. Family matters. Someone in this house wants me gone. I've changed my will, and I think it stirred trouble. I want you to find out who's plotting against me before it's too late." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A new will, you say? Who benefits?" Lord Ashford hesitated. "My wife, Eleanor, mostly. Henry, my nephew, was to inherit, but things have changed. I can't say more now. Just watch them, Poirot. Find the truth." Before Poirot could ask more, a scream tore through the house. We rushed out, following the sound to the hall. Margaret stood there, her face white, pointing toward the study we'd just left. He's dead, she murmured. We ran back to the study. The door was still locked, but Poirot twisted the knob, and it gave way. Inside, Lord Ashford lay slumped over his desk, his face grey, a glass of brandy spilled beside him. His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. I felt sick. Poirot knelt beside him, sniffing the glass. Cyanide, he said grimly. Mon Dieu, the murder has already happened. The household gathered, gasping and whispering. Lady Eleanor clutched her pearls, her face pale. Henry stared, his mouth open. Clara pressed a hand to her chest, tears in her eyes. Dr. Langston pushed forward, checking Ashford's pulse, but shook his head. He's gone, he said. Margaret sobbed quietly, and James muttered something about bad timing. Eliza stood frozen, her eyes huge. Inspector Japp arrived within the hour, his familiar face a comfort in the chaos. He took charge, ordering everyone to stay put. Right, Poirot, he said. You were here when it happened. What's your take? Poirot paced the study, his eyes darting over every detail, the spilled brandy, the locked door, a pen lying oddly on the desk, not lined up with the neat stack of papers. This is no accident, Japp, he said. This is murder, planned with care. But by whom and why? As Japp questioned the household, I watched Poirot. He picked up the pen, frowned, and set it down exactly where it was. He glanced at the desk's blotter, where a faint smudge of ink caught the light. Curious, he murmured. Very curious. The night grew late, and Japp sent everyone to their rooms, posting a constable at the manor's entrance. Poirot and I sat in the guest room, the fire low. Hastings, he said, this is a puzzle with many pieces. The locked door, the poison, the pen, the smudge. They tell a story, but we must listen carefully to hear it. I nodded, though my head spun. Lord Ashford was dead, murdered under our noses. The manor felt like a trap, every shadow hiding. A secret who had done this. And what was the delicate matter Ashford feared? As I drifted to sleep, I heard Poirot muttering, the little grey cells, they are awake now. Chapter 2. The scene of the crime. The air in Ashford Manor felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. I stood in the grand hall, my heart still pounding from the sight of Lord Reginald Ashford slumped over his desk, his face grey and lifeless. The smell of spilled brandy and something sharp cyanide, Poirot had said, lingered in my nose. The study door was shut now, guarded by a young constable with a nervous look. Hercule Poirot, my old friend, was already at work, his sharp eyes scanning the hall as if it held secrets only he could see. His neat little moustache twitched, a sure sign his brain was buzzing. Hastings, he said, his voice low but crisp. You look pale, mon ami. Come, we must use the little grey cells now. A man is dead, and the truth hides in this house. I nodded, though my stomach churned. Murder wasn't new to me. I'd seen plenty with Poirot, but it never got easier. Lord Ashford had been alive just an hour ago, talking about enemies and a new will. Now he was gone, poisoned in a locked room. Who could have done it, and how? Inspector Japp bustled in, his round face red from the chilly night air. He was a good man, Japp, but he relied on Poirot's knack for unravelling puzzles. Right? Poirot, he said, pulling out a notebook. Let's get to it. The doctors confirmed it's cyanide in the brandy, quick and nasty. But that locked door's got me stumped. No one could have got in or out, could they? Poirot's eyes sparkled. Ah, Japp, you assume too much. A locked door is not always locked. We shall see. He turned to the constable. No one has touched the study since we left it. No, sir, the constable said, standing straighter. Locked tight, as you said. Good, Poirot replied. Then let us begin. We followed him back to the study. The constable unlocked the door, and we stepped inside. The room looked just as we'd left it. Dark wood walls, a crackling fire now dying in the hearth, bookshelves stuffed with leather-bound volumes, and the big oak desk where Lord Ashford lay. His body was still there, covered with a sheet Jap had ordered. The spilled brandy glass glinted on the desk, its sharp smell mixing with the musty scent of old books. A single pen lay at an odd angle, not lined up with the neat stack of papers. Beside it, a blotter on the desk had a faint smudge of ink, barely noticeable. I wouldn't have seen it if Poirot hadn't pointed it out earlier. Poirot moved like a cat, silent and careful. He knelt by the desk, sniffing the glass again. Cyanide, he murmured. Poured into the brandy, no doubt. But when and by whom? He stood and examined the door, running his fingers along the frame. Then he moved to the window, a tall one with heavy curtains. He pushed them aside and tested the latch. It clicked open easily, but the window was shut tight. Jap, Poirot said. This window has it been open since the body was found? Jap shook his head. Not that I know of. The constable's been here the whole time. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. Interesting, very interesting. He turned back to the desk, picking up the pen with a handkerchief. This pen, it is not where it belongs. Lord Ashford was a man of order, Nan. Yet this is out of place. Why? I shrugged. Maybe he knocked it when he, collapsed. Poirot gave me a patient smile. Hastings, you see, but you do not observe. A man does not knock a pen so precisely askew when he is dying. No, this was placed here, but by whom? Jap scratched his head. You're making this complicated. Poirot, cyanide's not easy to come by. Whoever did this planned it. We've got to question the household. Everyone's got a reason to want Ashford out of the way. From what I hear, precisement, Poirot said. Motive means opportunity. We shall find them all. But first, the room tells its story. Let us listen. He spent the next half hour poking around the study, while Jap and I watched. He measured the distance from the desk to the window, checked the fireplace ashes, and even lifted the rug to look underneath. I thought he was being fussy, but Poirot never did anything without a reason. He paused at the blotter, tilting his head to study the ink smudge. Curious, he said. This ink is fresh, yet the papers are untouched. Why write and leave no trace? Jap sighed. You and your clues, Poirot. I say we start with the wife. Lady Eleanor gets the lot now, doesn't she? That's motive enough. Poirot raised a finger. Patience, mon ami. The heart of the crime is here, in this room. We must understand it before we chase the suspects. But Jap was already moving. He called the household into the drawing room, where they'd gathered after the scream. The air was thick with fear and suspicion. Lady Eleanor sat on a velvet sofa, her blonde hair catching the firelight. She dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief, but I couldn't tell if her tears were real. Henry Ashford paced by the window, his hands in his pockets, his face dark. Clara Beaumont, the secretary, sat stiffly, her hands folded in her lap. Dr. Victor Langston leaned against the mantel, his eyes cold. Margaret Poole, the housekeeper, stood near the door, her face pale but her jaw set. James Carver, the business rival, smoked a cigarette, blowing rings like he didn't care. Eliza Thornton, the maid, hovered in the corner, twisting her apron. Japp cleared his throat. Right, everyone. Lord Ashford's been murdered, poisoned. Nobody leaves this house until we sort this out. I want to know where each of you was between 8 and 9 tonight when he died. The room erupted in murmurs. Lady Eleanor spoke first, her voice shaky. I was in my room, changing for dinner. I didn't see Reginald after we left the dining room. Henry snorted. Convenient, Aunt Eleanor. You were quick to cry over him, weren't you? Henry, she snapped. How dare you? I loved my husband. Poirot raised a hand. Please, let us have calm. Monsieur Henry, your whereabouts? Henry glared at Eleanor, then shrugged. I was in the library, reading, alone. Nobody saw me, if that's what you're asking. Clara's voice was soft but clear. I was in my office, typing letters for Lord Ashford. I heard him moving in the study next door, but I didn't go in. Dr. Langston crossed his arms. I was in the garden, getting some air. It was stuffy in here after dinner. Margaret stepped forward. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up. I served the brandy to Lord Ashford myself, but it was fine then. I swear it. James Carver flicked ash into a tray. I was outside, smoking. By the terrace, saw nothing, heard nothing. Eliza's voice trembled. I was upstairs, cleaning the guest rooms. I didn't come down until Margaret screamed. Poirot listened, his eyes flicking from one to another. I could tell he was storing every word, every glance, in that sharp mind of his. Mercy, he said, your stories are noted. But stories, they can be true or false. We shall see. Japp jotted down their answers, muttering about alibis. I leaned toward Poirot. Nobody's got a solid witness, I whispered. Any of them could have slipped into the study. He nodded. We, Hastings. But the truth lies not just in what they say, but in what they do not say. Observe their faces, their hands. Fear, guilt, anger, they show themselves. I looked. Again, Lady Eleanor's fingers twisted her handkerchief into knots. Henry's jaw was tight, like he was holding back a shout. Clara's eyes darted to Henry, then away. Dr. Langston's foot tapped, just a little. Margaret's hands were clenched so hard her knuckles were white. James seemed calm, but his cigarette burned too fast. Eliza looked like she might bolt. Japp sent everyone to their rooms, except Margaret, who he asked to show us the kitchen. Poirot wanted to see where the brandy came from. The kitchen was big, with copper pots hanging on racks and a long table scrubbed clean. Margaret pointed to a shelf. That's the decanter I used, she said. I filled Lord Ashford's glass myself, like always. He liked a nightcap in his study. Poirot examined the decanter, sniffing it carefully. No cyanide here, he said. The poison was added later, in the study. Tell me, Madame Poole, did you see anyone near the study after dinner? Margaret hesitated, her eyes flickering. No, sir. I was busy here, but I heard footsteps in the hall, maybe around 8:30. I thought it was Lord Ashford. Poirot's moustache twitched. Footsteps. Very good. And the glass, did you wash it before filling it? Of course, she said, bristling. I always do. He nodded, dismissing her. As she left, I saw her glance back, her face tight with worry. She's hiding something, I said to Poirot. Perhaps, he replied, or perhaps she's only afraid. Fear makes people act strangely, mon ami. We returned to the study, where Japp was talking to the constable. Poirot knelt by the window again, running his fingers along the frame. "Aha," he said, pointing to a tiny scratch near the latch. "This is new. Someone opened this window, perhaps to enter or leave. But why lock the door and not the window?" Japp frowned. "You think the killer came in from outside?" Poirot shrugged. "It is possible, or they wished us to think so. We must consider all possibilities." The night dragged on, and Japp's men searched the manor. They found no cyanide, no obvious weapon, but Poirot kept circling back to the desk, the pen, the smudge, the papers. He picked up a sheet, holding it to the light. "These papers," he said, "they are too neat. A man about to die does not arrange his desk so perfectly. Someone has been here after the murder." I shivered. "You mean the killer tidied up?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or perhaps they looked for something. A will, a letter, a secret. We shall find out." By midnight, Japp was exhausted. "I'm calling it for tonight," he said. "We'll question them again tomorrow." "You staying, Poirot Notre-Dame," Poirot said. "The manor is the heart of this mystery. I shall not leave until—" The truth is clear. We were shown to a guest room, a big one with heavy curtains and a four-poster bed. The fire was low, casting shadows on the walls. I couldn't shake the feeling that the manor was watching us, its secrets locked in its old stones. "Poirot," I said, "this place gives me the creeps. Everyone's got a reason to hate Ashford, haven't they?" He smiled, settling into an armchair. "We, Hastings, greed, love, revenge, these are the threads of murder. But the pen, the smudge, the window, they are the clues that will lead us to the truth. Sleep now, mon ami. Tomorrow we hunt." I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The manor was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. Somewhere in this house, a killer was hiding, and Poirot, with his sharp mind and sharper eyes, was already on their trail. Chapter 3. The suspect's alibis. The morning sun crept through the heavy curtains of Ashford Manor, casting long shadows across the guest room where I lay awake. The events of last night. Lord Reginald Ashford's lifeless body slumped over. His desk, the sharp smell of cyanide, and Hercule Poirot's sharp eyes scanning the study kept me from sleeping. The manor felt like a cage, every creak of the old wood floors hiding a secret. I glanced at Poirot, who was already up, adjusting his tie in front of a mirror with that fussy precision of his. His mustache was perfectly curled, as if murder didn't disturb his routine one bit. "Hastings," he said, catching my eye in the reflection, "you look like a man who has seen a ghost. Come, mon ami, we have work to do. The killer is among us, and their alibis will tell us more than they wish." I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "Poirot, they all claim they were somewhere else when Ashford died, but nobody's got a witness. How do we sort out who's lying?" He smiled, a glint in his eye. "By listening, Hastings, not just to their words, but to their silences, their glances, their hands. The truth hides in the details. Now, let us breakfast and begin." We headed downstairs to the dining room, where a somber mood hung over the table. The chandelier sparkled above, but the air was thick with tension. The household was already there, picking at their food, toast eggs, and kippers that nobody seemed to want. Lady Eleanor Ashford sat at the head, her blonde hair pinned up, her face pale but composed. She stirred her tea endlessly, the spoon clinking against the cup. Henry Ashford, the nephew, slouched in his chair, his dark hair messy, his eyes red, like he hadn't slept either. Clara Beaumont, the secretary, sat quietly, her hands folded, but her fingers twitched now and then. Dr. Victor Langston, the family doctor, buttered his toast with sharp, jerky movements, his jaw tight. Margaret Poole, the housekeeper, bustled in with a fresh pot of tea, her face drawn but her eyes sharp. James Carver, the business rival, leaned back, smoking a cigarette, his face unreadable. Eliza Thornton, the maid, stood by the sideboard, pouring coffee with shaky hands. Inspector Japp was there too, sipping tea and scribbling in his notebook. He looked up as we entered. "Morning, Poirot. Ready to crack this case? I've got my men searching the grounds, but I'm counting on you to sort out this lot." He nodded toward the suspects. Poirot bowed slightly. "Bonjour, Japp. The grounds may yield clues, but the heart of the crime lies in the minds of those in this room. I shall question them, one by one, in the library. Hastings, you will take notes." I nodded, grabbing a pad and pencil from my bag. The library sounded like a good spot, quiet, away from prying ears. As we ate, I watched the others. Lady Eleanor avoided everyone's eyes, staring at her tea like it held answers. Henry muttered something to Clara, who shook her head quickly. Dr. Langston glanced at Margaret, who looked away. James blew smoke rings, but his foot tapped under the table. Eliza nearly spilled the coffee when Japp asked her to refill his cup. Something was off with all of them, but what? After breakfast, Poirot led the way to the library, a big room with tall shelves stuffed with books, a long table, and leather armchairs by a window overlooking the gardens. The air smelled of old paper and polish. A fire crackled in the hearth, but it didn't chase away the chill. Poirot sat at the table, motioning for me to sit beside him. "We begin with Lady Eleanor," he said. "She is the widow and the one who gains the most. Let us see what she hides." Margaret showed Lady Eleanor in, and she sat across from us, smoothing her dress. Her blue eyes were wide, but her lips were tight, like she was holding back tears or something else. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice soft, "this is awful. Reginald was everything to me. Who would do such a thing?" Poirot leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Madame, my condolences. But to find the truth, I must ask questions. Where were you last night, between 8 and 9, when your husband died?" She hesitated, twisting her handkerchief. "I was in my room, changing for bed. I'd had a headache after dinner, so I left early. I didn't see Reginald after we left the dining room." "No one saw you?" Poirot asked, his eyes sharp. "No," she admitted. "I was alone, but I didn't go near the study, I swear." Nodded. "And your husband's you knew of it?" Her face flushed. "Yes, he told me a few days ago. He said he was leaving most of the estate to me. I didn't ask for it, Mr. Poirot. I loved him, not his money." I scribbled her words, but I noticed her hands, they were trembling, just a little. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Merci, madame. That is all for now." As she left, I whispered, "She seemed nervous. Poirot, do you think she's lying?" "Perhaps," he said. "Her grief is real, but is it for her husband or her situation? We shall see." Next was Henry Ashford, who stormed in like a sulky schoolboy. He dropped into the chair, crossing his arms. "This is a waste of time," he snapped. "I didn't kill Uncle Reginald. Why would I? I was his heir till that new will, anyway." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "So you knew of the change?" Henry's jaw tightened. "He told me yesterday. Said he was giving everything to Eleanor. I was angry, sure, but I didn't poison him." Where were you at the time of the murder? Poirot asked. In the library here, Henry said, waving a hand. Reading. I wanted to be alone after that row with him. No one saw you. Poirot pressed. No, Henry said, glaring. What's it matter? I didn't do it. Poirot studied him, then nodded. Very well, monsieur, you may go. As Henry left, I said, he's got a temper, Poirot, and he's furious about the... Will we, Poirot said. Anger is a motive, but is it enough? Let us see the next. Clara Beaumont came in, her grey dress plain but neat. She sat straight, her hands folded, but her eyes flicked to the door, like she wanted to run. Miss Beaumont, Poirot began. You were Lord Ashford's secretary. You worked closely with him, Nan. Yes, she said, her voice quiet. I typed his letters, managed his schedule. He was kind to me. And last night Poirot asked, where were you? In my office, next to the study, she said. I was typing letters until about 8:30. I heard him moving around, but I didn't go in. I left to get tea from the kitchen. You heard nothing else? Poirot asked. No voices, no footsteps. She hesitated, her fingers twitching. I thought I heard the study door open, but I wasn't sure. I was focused on my work. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And the will did you know of it? She nodded slowly. I typed it for him yesterday. He said it was urgent. I didn't read it, but I knew it was important. As she left, I leaned over. She's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see her hands? She's nervous. Very good, Hastings, he said. She knows more than she says. But what? Dr. Victor Langston was next, his face sour as he sat. Down he carried his doctor's bag, clutching it like a shield. This is ridiculous, he said. I'm a doctor, not a murderer. Poirot smiled politely. Of course, doctor, but tell me, where were you last night? In the garden, Langston said. I needed air after dinner. It was stuffy in the house. Alone, Poirot asked. Yes, Langston said, his eyes cold. I like my own company. And your relationship with Lord Ashford? Poirot pressed. Langston's jaw twitched. He was my patient. We got along well enough. Poirot nodded. Mercy, doctor, you may go. As Langston left, I said, he's prickly, isn't he? And that bag, he never lets it go, precisement, Poirot said. A man who clings to his bag may have something to hide. Let us see the housekeeper. Margaret Poole came in, her black uniform crisp but her face pale. She stood, hands clasped, like she was facing a judge. Mrs. Poole, Poirot said, you served the brandy to Lord Ashford. Tell me about it. Filled his glass from the decanter in the kitchen, she said. It was clean, like always. I took it to his study around 8. He was alive then, I swear. And after, Poirot asked, where did you go? Back to the kitchen, she said. I was cleaning up. I didn't see him again until I found him. Her voice broke, and I felt a pang of sympathy. But Poirot's eyes were sharp. You heard footsteps, you said last night. Can you say more? She hesitated. I thought it was him, but it might have been someone else. The hall echoes. Poirot nodded. Mercy, madame, that is all. As she left, I said, she's loyal to Ashford, but she's scared. You think she knows who it was? Perhaps, Poirot said. Fear is a powerful thing, Hastings. It locks the tongue. James Carver sauntered in, his cigarette dangling from his lips. He sat with a smirk, like he was above it all. Mr. Carver, Poirot said. You were a guest here. Why? Business, Carver said. Ashford and I were working on a deal. It fell through, but that's life. And last night, Poirot asked. Outside, smoking on the terrace, Carver said. I saw nothing, heard nothing, just wanted. A quiet smoke. Poirot's mustache twitched. You had no quarrel with Lord Ashford? Carver shrugged. We argued, sure. He backed out of our deal. But I didn't kill him over it. Very well, Poirot said. You may go. As Carver left, I said, he's too calm, Poirot. Like he's hiding something behind that smirk. Oui, Poirot said. A man who smiles in a murder investigation is either innocent or very clever. Finally, Eliza Thornton crept in, her eyes wide with fear. She was young, maybe 20, with a pale face and nervous hands. Miss Thornton, Poirot said gently, you are the maid. You see much in this house, Nan. Clean, she stammered. I don't know anything. Where were you last night? Poirot asked. Upstairs, cleaning the guest rooms, she said. I didn't come down until Mrs. Poole screamed. No one saw you. Poirot pressed. She shook her head, her apron twisted in her hands. No, sir, I was alone. Poirot leaned forward. And Lord Ashford, you knew him well. He was kind, she said quickly. He never shouted at me. Not like some mercy, Poirot said. You may go. As she hurried out, I said, she's terrified, Poirot. But why? She's just a maid. No one is just anything, Hastings, he said. Everyone has a story, and hers is not yet clear. We sat back, the library quiet, except for the crackling fire. I looked at my notes. 7 suspects. 7 alibis. None with a witness. Poirot, I said, they could all be lying. How do we find the truth? He smiled, tapping his temple. With the little grey cells, mon ami. Each one told us something, even if they did not mean to. Lady Eleanor's trembling hands, Henry's anger, Clara's hesitation, Langston's coldness, Margaret's fear, Carver's calm, Eliza's terror. These are clues. And the study, the pen, the smudge, the window they speak to. Japp poked his head in. Anything, Poirot. My men found nothing on the grounds. No cyanide, no footprints. Poirot nodded. The answer is here, Japp, in this house. We must keep watching, listening. The killer will betray themselves. The rest of the day was a blur of questions and searches. Poirot wandered the manor, poking into corners, examining doors, even sniffing the air like a bloodhound. I followed, trying to keep up with his quick mind. He kept coming back to the study, staring at the desk, the pen, the smudge. Something is missing, he muttered. A paper, a letter, something Ashford meant to show us. By evening, the manor felt more like a prison. The suspects avoided each other, their eyes full of suspicion. Dinner was silent, the clink of cutlery the only sound. Poirot watched, his face calm but his eyes alive. I knew he was piecing it together, bit by bit. As we returned to our room, I said, Poirot, this is a mess. Everyone's got a reason to hate Ashford. Money, love, revenge. How do we narrow it down? He settled into an armchair, his hands steepled. By order and method, Hastings. The clues are there, the pen out of place, the smudge of ink, the scratch on the window. They tell a story, and the alibis, they are too perfect, too alone. Someone lies. Tomorrow we dig deeper. I lay in bed, the manor creaking round me. The suspects' faces swam in my mind. Eleanor's tears, Henry's glare, Clara's twitch, Langston's coldness, Margaret's fear, Carver's smirk, Eliza's panic. One of them was a killer, and Poirot, with his sharp mind and sharper eyes, was closing in. Chapter 4. A Question of Motive. The second morning at Ashford Manor dawned grey and cold, the sky heavy with clouds that pressed down on the old house like a lid. I woke with a start, the memory of Lord Reginald Ashford's lifeless face still haunting me, his study, the locked door, the spilled brandy, the sharp whiff of cyanide felt like a bad dream, but it was all too real. Hercule Poirot was already up, standing by the window of our guest room, his hands clasped behind his back, his moustache as neat as ever. He stared out at the gardens, where mist curled around the rose bushes like ghostly fingers. "Hastings," he said without turning, "you sleep like a man troubled by shadows. But today we must chase the light. Motive, mon ami, is what drives murder. We know where they claim to have been, but why would someone kill Lord Ashford? That is the key." I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the fog of unease. "Poirot, it's all a muddle. Everyone's got a reason: money, love, grudges. How do we sort it out?" He turned, his eyes twinkling. "By observing, Hastings. The heart of a killer betrays itself in small things: words, fear, anger. We shall dig into their lives, and the truth will show itself. Now, let us go to breakfast." The dining room was as tense as a stretched wire. The chandelier glowed dimly, casting flickers on the long table where the household sat, picking at plates of kedgeree, toast, and fruit. Nobody looked at each other, their eyes fixed on their food or the walls. Lady Eleanor Ashford, the widow, sat at the head, her blonde hair pulled tight, her face pale but calm. She sipped coffee, her spoon clinking softly, but her eyes were red, like she'd cried all night. Henry Ashford, the nephew, slumped in his chair, his dark hair messy, stabbing at his eggs like they'd done him wrong. Clara Beaumont, the secretary, sat straight, her hands folded, but her fingers tapped the table now and then. Dr. Victor Langston, the doctor, ate quickly, his face sour, his doctor's bag at his feet like a guard dog. Margaret Poole, the housekeeper, brought in fresh tea, her face tired but her eyes sharp, missing nothing. James Carver, the business rival, leaned back, smoking a cigarette, his smirk hiding something I couldn't place. Eliza Thornton, the maid, poured juice with shaky hands, jumping when a fork clattered. Inspector Japp was there, gulping tea and scribbling in his notebook. He looked up as we sat down. "Morning, Poirot. My men found nothing new on the grounds. No poison, no tracks. I'm banking on you to crack this lot open." He nodded toward the suspects. Poirot smiled politely. "Bonjour, Japp. The grounds are silent, but the people are not. Today we seek their motives. I shall speak with them again, in the drawing room this time. Hastings, you will take notes." I grabbed my pad and pencil, my stomach grumbling despite the grim mood. The drawing room sounded better than the library, warmer, less stuffy. As I ate, I watched the others. Lady Eleanor's spoon trembled slightly. Henry muttered something to Clara, who shook her head fast. Dr. Langston glanced at Margaret, who looked away. James blew smoke rings, but his foot tapped under the table. Eliza nearly spilled the juice when Japp asked for more. They were all on edge, and I wondered what secrets they hid. After breakfast, Poirot led us to the drawing room, a grand space with velvet sofas, tall windows, and a fireplace where logs crackled. The air smelled of wood smoke and lavender, but it couldn't mask the tension. Portraits of stern Ashfords glared from the walls, their eyes following us. Poirot sat in an armchair, motioning for me to sit beside him with my notebook. "We begin. With Monsieur Japp," he said. "He has news, Nan." Japp nodded, standing by the fire. "Right, Poirot. I've been digging into the household, thanks to some telegrams from London. Here's what I've got." He flipped open his notebook. "Lady Eleanor married Ashford 2 years ago, after a whirlwind romance. She's got expensive tastes, dresses, jewels, trips to Paris. Ashford was footing the bill, but word is he was tightening the purse strings. The new will leaves her the estate, worth a fortune. Motive, money." Lady Eleanor, who'd just entered, gasped. "That's unfair, Inspector. I loved Reginald. I didn't care about his wealth." Poirot raised a hand. "Madame, please, sit. Tell us, did you know Lord Ashford was changing his will?" She sank onto a sofa, her handkerchief twisted in her hands. "Yes, he told me last week. He said it was to protect me. I didn't ask for it, Mr. Poirot, I swear." Her voice shook, and I scribbled her words. Her eyes were wet, but something in her face too perfect, maybe, made me wonder. Poirot's mustache twitched. "And your husband's enemies? Did he speak of any?" She hesitated. "He mentioned business troubles. With Mr. Carver, perhaps. And Henry was angry about the will. But enemies, I don't know." "Mercy," Poirot said. "You may go." As she left, I whispered, "She's got the most to gain, Poirot, and those tears real or fake?" "Perhaps both," he said. "Grief and guilt can live together. Let us see the nephew." Henry stormed in, his face dark. He dropped into a chair, crossing his arms. "This is nonsense," he snapped. "I didn't kill Uncle Reginald. Why would I? I was set to inherit everything until that blasted will." Japp snorted. "That's motive, lad. Word is, you've got gambling debts piling up in London. Needed cash, didn't you?" Henry's cheeks flushed. "That's my business." "Yes, I owed money, but I'd never hurt him. He was like a father to me." Poirot leaned forward. "Monsieur Henry, you argued with your uncle about the will, Nan?" Henry glared. "Yes, yesterday. He said he was giving it all to Eleanor. I told him she didn't deserve it, but he wouldn't listen. I was angry, but I didn't poison him." "What did you do after the argument?" Poirot asked. "Went to the library," Henry said. "I told you, I was reading, alone." Poirot nodded. "And you knew no one else who wished him harm?" Henry hesitated, his eyes flicking to the door. "Clara, she was close to him. Too close, maybe." "Ask her, Messie," Poirot said. "You may go." As Henry left, I said, "He's bitter. Those debts and losing the inheritance." "That's a strong motive," Poirot said. "But anger is loud, and murder is quiet. Let us see Mademoiselle Beaumont." Clara entered, her grey dress neat but her face pale. She sat straight, her hands folded, but her fingers twitched. "Miss Beaumont," Poirot began, "you worked closely with Lord Ashford. What was he like?" "He was kind," she said softly, "strict, but fair. He trusted me with his papers, his secrets." Japp cut in. "Secrets, eh? Like the new will? You typed it, didn't you? And word is, you're sweet on Henry Ashford. Did you help him plan this?" Clara's eyes widened. "No. I typed the will, yes, but I didn't read it. And Henry, we're friends, that's all. I'd never hurt Lord Ashford." Poirot's eyes were sharp. "You heard him in the study last night, you said. Anything else? Voices? Footsteps? She bit her lip. I heard someone in the hall, maybe 8:15, but I didn't see who. And your feelings for Monsieur Henry? Poirot asked gently. Her cheeks flushed. I care for him, but it's not what you think. I'd never do anything wrong, Mercy, Poirot said. You may go. As she left, I said, she's loyal to Henry, Poirot, maybe too loyal. And she heard someone, why not say who? Fear, perhaps, Poirot said. Or love. Both cloud the truth. Now, the doctor. Dr. Langston strode in, his face sour, his bag clutched tight. He sat stiffly, like he was on trial. Dr. Poirot said, You knew Lord Ashford's health. Was he well? Healthy as a horse, Langston said. No reason to die, except that poison. Japp flipped a page. You've got a past, Doctor. A malpractice scandal, hushed up by Ashford years ago. Owed him, didn't you? Or maybe you resented him. Langston's jaw twitched. That was nothing. A mistake, long forgotten. I was grateful to him. Where were you last night, Poirot? Asked Garden. Langston said. I told you, alone. And you saw nothing unusual. Poirot pressed. Nothing, Langston said, his eyes cold. Can I go now, Mercy? Poirot said. You may go. As Langston left, I said, he's cagey. That's Ganderland. He's got access to poisons, being a doctor. Precisement, Poirot said. A man with a grudge is a man with means. Let us see the housekeeper. Margaret entered, her apron crisp, her hands clasped tight. Mrs. Poole, Poirot said, you served Lord Ashford years. You knew his habits. Yes, yes, she said, her voice steady. He liked his brandy every night. I poured it myself. It was clean. Japp leaned forward. You've been here forever, Margaret. Ashford's solicitor says you're loyal, but the new will means you might lose your place here. Worried about that? Margaret's face tightened. I served him faithfully. I didn't need his money, but that will, it all for Lady Eleanor, wasn't right. You disapproved of Lady Eleanor. Poirot asked. She hesitated. She's not like that. Not like his first wife. She spends too much. But I didn't kill him. And last night, Poirot said, you heard footsteps. I told you, she said. I thought it was him. Maybe it wasn't. Mercy, Poirot said. You may go. As she left, I said, she's loyal, but she doesn't like Eleanor. And those footsteps she's holding back. Poirot said. Loyalty binds her, but fear loosens. The tongue. We shall see. James Carver sauntered in, his cigarette burning. He sat with a smirk, legs crossed. Mr. Carver, Poirot said, your business with Lord Ashford failed, Nan. Yes, Carver said. He backed out of our deal. Cost me a fortune. But that's business. Japp snorted. Enough to make you angry. Word is, your company's on the rocks. Ashford's death clears your path, doesn't it? Carver laughed. You're barking up, Inspector. I don't kill over contracts. I was smoking outside last night, like I said. And you saw nothing? Poirot asked. Nothing, Carver said, his smirk fading. Just the stars. Mercy? Poirot said, you may go. As Carver left, I said, he's too smooth, Poirot, like he's hiding a knife behind that smile. Perhaps, Poirot said, a clever man hides his anger well. Finally, Eliza crept in, her eyes wide, her apron twisted. Miss Thornton, Poirot said gently, you see much in this house. What do you know of Lord Ashford? He was kind, she whispered. He gave me work when I had none. I didn't know about his troubles. You were upstairs last night? Poirot asked. Yes, she said, her voice shaking. Cleaning rooms. I didn't come down until the scream. Jap frowned. You're nervous, girl. Heard something about your past connected to Ashford's sister, maybe. Eliza's face went white. I don't know what you mean. I'm just a maid. Mercy, Poirot said softly. You may go. As she fled, I said, she's scared stiff. Poirot. What's she hiding? Something, Poirot said. A secret perhaps, tied to her family. We shall find it. After the interviews, Poirot paced the drawing room, while Jap and I watched the... Poirot paced the drawing room, his eyes distant. Motives, he said, they are like a tangled net of Noah's wealth. Langston's grudge, Margaret's loyalty, Clara's love, Eliza's past, Henry's debts, Margaret's fear, Carver's ruin, Eliza's secret. But one motive is stronger than the others. We must find it. He stopped by the fireplace, picking up a poker to stir the logs. A scrap of paper, half-burned, fluttered out, landing at his feet. He snatched it up, holding it to the light. Mon Dieu, he murmured. What is this? I leaned over. The paper was tiny, charred at the edges, with one word scrawled in. Ink, trust. It looked like part of a letter, torn apart. Poirot, I said, is that a clue? Oui, he said, his eyes gleaming. A clue to Ashford's fears. He spoke of trust, of betrayal. This paper, it was meant to be destroyed, but it survives. We must return to the study. We hurried back to the study, where the constable let us in. The room was as we'd left. It desk, papers, glass, Ashford's chair now empty. Poirot went straight to the desk, examining the blotter again. The ink smudge was still there, faint but clear. This smudge, he said, it matches the ink on the scrap. Ashford wrote something, a letter, a note, and someone tried to hide it. Jap scratched his head. You're saying the killer burned it? Perhaps, Poirot said, or perhaps they took it. We must search for more. He rummaged through the desk, finding nothing but bills, ledgers, letters about business. But then, under a stack of papers, he found a torn corner, its edge matching the burned scrap. Aha, he said. This is part of it, but where is the rest? The day wore on, with Jap's men searching rooms and Poirot poking into every corner. The suspects stayed apart, their faces tight with fear or anger. Dinner was a grim affair, the clink of cutlery loud in the silence. Poirot watched, his eyes missing nothing: Leonard's trembling spoon, Henry's glare, Twitch, Langston's cold stare, Margaret's poise, Carver's smirk. Eliza's flinched back in our room. I sat by the fire, my notes a jumble of motives. Poirot, I said, everyone's got a reason to kill. Eleanor gets the money, Henry's broke, Clara loves him. Got a past, Margaret's scared, Carver's ruined, Eliza's hiding something. And that scrap, trust, what's it mean? Poirot settled in his chair, his hands steepled. The scrap is a key, Hastings. Ashford feared a betrayal. The will, the money, the secrets, they point to someone close. The pen, the smudge, the scrap, the window, they tell a story. Tomorrow we follow it. I lay in bed, the manor creaking around me. The suspects' faces haunted Delanor's tears, Henry's anger, Clara's fear, Langston's shame, Margaret's duty, Carver's calm, Eliza's panic. One was a killer, and Poirot was closing in, his little grey cells weaving a trap. Chapter 5. The missing will. The third morning at Ashford Manor broke with a drizzle that tapped against the windows like nervous fingers. I woke feeling heavy, the weight of Lord Reginald Ashford's murder pressing on my chest. The image of his grey face, the spilled brandy, and that sharp cyanide smell haunted me. Hercule Poirot, my friend, was already dressed, his suit crisp, his moustache perfectly curled. He stood by the fireplace in our guest room, warming his hands, his eyes distant but sharp, like a hawk watching for prey. "Hastings," he said, noticing me stir, "you sleep like a man chased by dreams. But today we chase something more. Solid the will of Lord Ashford. It is the heart of this crime, Nan. We must know its secrets." I sat up, my head foggy. "Poirot, everyone's talking about that Will Henry's angry, Eleanor's set to get everything. But how does it help us find the killer?" He smiled, tapping his temple. "The will is a map, mon ami. It shows us who gains, who loses, and who might kill to change the path. Today we meet the solicitor, and we watch the others. Their faces will speak louder than their words." I nodded, pulling on my clothes. The manor felt more like a trap each day, its old walls hiding lies and danger. Breakfast waited downstairs, and I braced myself for another tense meal with the suspects. The dining room was quiet, the clink of cups and forks sharp in the gloom. Rain streaked the tall windows, blurring the gardens outside. Lady Eleanor Ashford sat at the head, her blonde hair neat, but her face pale, her coffee untouched. Henry Ashford slouched across from her, his eyes red, stabbing at his bacon like it had wronged him. Clara Beaumont, the secretary, sat with her hands folded, her fingers twitching now and then. Dr. Victor Langston ate quickly, his doctor's bag at his feet, his jaw tight. Margaret Poole, the housekeeper, brought in toast, her face tired, but her eyes watchful. James Carver, the business rival, leaned back, smoking a cigarette, his smirk hiding something dark. Eliza Thornton, the maid, poured tea with shaky hands, flinching when Henry snapped at her to hurry. Inspector Japp was there, gulping tea and flipping through his notebook. He looked up as we sat down. "Morning, Poirot. The solicitor's coming at 10. Mr. Grayson, from London. Says he's got Ashford's will. Should clear things up, eh?" Poirot nodded, spreading butter on his toast with care. "Oui, Japp. The will is a light in this fog. But we must also watch those around it. Greed, anger, fear they will show. Themselves?" I grabbed my notebook, my stomach growling despite the heavy mood. As I ate, I watched the others. Lady Eleanor's spoon trembled as she stirred her coffee. Henry glared at her, his jaw tight. Clara's eyes flicked to Henry, then away. Dr. Langston glanced at Margaret, who looked down. James blew smoke rings, but his foot tapped under the table. Eliza nearly spilled the tea when Japp asked for more. They were all nervous, and I wondered what the will would reveal. After breakfast, Japp led us to the library, where the solicitor would meet us. The room was grand, with tall bookshelves, a long table, and armchairs by a fire that crackled softly. The air smelled of old books and wax, but the mood was anything but cozy. Poirot sat at the table, motioning for me to sit beside him with my notebook. "Hastings," he said, "write every word, every look. The will is a spark, and sparks start fires." Mr. Grayson arrived promptly, a thin man with grey hair and a briefcase clutched tight. He wore a stiff suit and round glasses that glinted in the firelight. Japp introduced us, and Grayson shook Poirot's hand, looking nervous. "Mr. Poirot," he said, "I've heard of your skills. Lord Ashford trusted me with his affairs, and I'm shaken by his death." "Mercy," Poirot said, gesturing to a chair. "Please, Monsieur Grayson, tell us of the will." Grayson opened his briefcase, pulling out a sealed envelope. "This is Lord Ashford's latest will, signed the day before his death. He was most insistent it be done quickly." He broke the seal and read aloud, his voice steady but thin. The will was clear. Lady Eleanor inherited the bulk of the estate Ashford Manor, the London house, and most of the fortune, worth millions. Henry Ashford got a small allowance, barely enough to cover his debts. Clara, Margaret, and Eliza each received modest sums for their service. Dr. Langston and James Carver got nothing. A charity trust, set up by Ashford, received a large donation, to be managed by his solicitor. The room went still, the only sound the crackling fire. Lady Eleanor, who'd been called in to hear, gasped softly, her hand to her chest. "Oh, Reginald," she whispered, her eyes wet, but I noticed her lips twitch, like she was fighting a smile. Henry, standing by the door, exploded. "This is outrageous," he shouted, slamming a fist on the table. "That woman tricked him. I was his heir, his blood. She doesn't deserve a penny." "Henry," Eleanor snapped, standing. "How dare you? I loved him. This is what he wanted." Poirot raised a hand. "Please, calm yourselves. Monsieur Grayson, was this will unusual?" Grayson adjusted his glasses. "Well, yes. Lord Ashford changed his will often, but this was sudden. He called me 2 days ago, insisting it be done at once. He seemed worried." "Worried?" Poirot asked, his eyes sharp. "Did he say why?" Grayson hesitated. "He mentioned a betrayal, but wouldn't explain. He said he needed to protect his legacy." I scribbled furiously, my heart racing. Betrayal, there was that word again, like the trust scrap from the fireplace. Poirot's mustache twitched, and the previous will who benefited. Grayson pulled another paper from his case. Henry was the main heir, with smaller sums for Lady Eleanor and the staff. The charity trust was smaller then. Henry smirked at Eleanor. "See, he meant to give it to me until you got your claws in him." "Enough," Japp barked. "You're not helping yourself, lad." Poirot turned to Eleanor. "Madame, you knew of this change?" She nodded, her handkerchief twisted. "He told me last week. He said it was for my future." "I didn't ask for it, Mr. Poirot," Mercy Poirot said. "You may go, Monsieur Grayson. We may need you again." As Eleanor and Grayson left, Henry stormed out, muttering curses. I leaned toward Poirot. "That will's a bombshell, Poirot. Henry's furious, and Eleanor's got everything. Motives are piling up." "Oui," Poirot said. "But a will is only paper until it is signed. We must know why Ashford changed it so suddenly. Let us return to the study." We headed back to the study, where the constable let us in. The room felt colder now, the desk empty without Ashford's body, but the spilled glass and papers remained. Poirot went straight to the desk, examining the blotter with its faint ink. "Smudge, this smudge," he said. "It is from the same ink as the trust scrap. Ashford wrote something, a letter, a note before he died. Where is it?" He rummaged through the drawers, finding bills, ledgers, and a few letters, but nothing new. Then he paused, tilting his head at the blotter. "Monsieur," he murmured, lifting it carefully. Underneath was a faint impression, like a ghost of writing, "Hastings, Look. Words pressed into the paper from something written hard. I squinted. The marks were faint, but I could make out bits. Trust broken, and must act, like fragments of a letter. Poirot. I said, is this what the killer burned? Perhaps, he said, his eyes gleaming. Or they took it. This is a shadow of Ashford's last words. We must find the original. Jap, who'd followed us, scratched his head. You're chasing ghosts, Poirot. I say we focus on Henry. He's got the motive, and he's got a temper. Poirot smiled. Patience, Jap. Motive is not enough. We need proof. And proof lies in the details. The pen, the smudge, the scrap, the window, this impression. They tell a story. The day dragged on, with Jap's men searching the manor and Poirot poking into every corner. He questioned the suspects again, casually, in the drawing room or hall, watching their reactions to the will. Lady Eleanor stayed in her room, claiming a headache, but Margaret said she'd heard her pacing. Henry drank heavily in the library, muttering about Eleanor's scheming. Clara worked in her office, her face pale, avoiding Henry's gaze. Dr. Langston stayed in the garden, clutching his bag, his eyes cold. Margaret bustled about, but her hands shook when she served tea. James Carver smoked on the terrace, his smirk gone, his face tight. Eliza cleaned upstairs, her eyes red from crying. At lunch, the tension boiled over. Henry, his face flushed from whiskey, slammed his glass down. You're all pretending, he shouted, pointing at Eleanor. She's the one who benefits, and you're all covering for her. Eleanor stood, her voice icy. You're drunk. Henry, go sleep it off. Clara touched Henry's arm. Please, don't make it worse. He shook her off, storming out. Poirot watched, his eyes narrow. Interesting, he murmured. The will is a knife, cutting them apart. After lunch, Poirot pulled me aside in the hall. Hastings, he said, we must test them. I have a plan. Tonight, at dinner, I shall say we've found a clue, a paper in the study. We shall see who reacts. I nodded, my pulse quickening. You think the killer will panic? He said. The guilty cannot hide forever. Dinner was a grim affair. The rain drumming outside, the candles flickering on the table. The food roast, lamb, potatoes, peas was fine, but nobody ate much. Poirot waited until dessert, then cleared his throat. Mies, Amos, he said, today. We found something in the study, a paper, hidden, with words that point to the killer. The room went still. Eleanor's spoon froze mid-air. Henry's glass stopped at his lips. Clara's hands gripped her napkin. Langston's eyes narrowed. Margaret dropped a tray, the clatter loud. Carver's cigarette burned forgotten. Eliza gasped, her hand to her mouth. A paper, Jap said, playing along. What's it say, Poirot? Poirot smiled. It is not for now, Jap, but it is safe, and it will lead us to the truth. The suspects exchanged glances, their faces tight. I watched, my heart pounding. Someone here was the killer, and Poirot's trap was closing. After dinner, Poirot and I returned to the study, checking the desk again. He paused at the window, examining the scratch on the latch. This scratch, he said, it is deliberate. Someone wanted us to think the killer came from outside. But why? I shivered. You think it's a trick? Perhaps, he said. Or a mistake. We shall see. Back in our room, I sat by the fire, my notes a tangle of motives and clues. Poirot, I said, the wills turned them against each other. Eleanor's rich, Henry's broke, Clara's torn, Langston's bitter, Margaret's scared, Carver's desperate, Eliza's hiding something. And that impression, trust broken, what's it mean? Poirot settled in his chair, his hands steepled. The will is the heart, Hastings. Ashford changed it for a reason. Betrayal, trust broken. The scrap, the smudge, the impression. The pen, the window, they are pieces of a puzzle. Someone took his words, burned them, hid them. Tomorrow we find more. I lay in bed, the manor creaking, the rain tapping. The suspects' faces swirled Delanor's tears, Henry's rage, Clara's fear, Langston's coldness, Margaret's duty, Carver's calm, Eliza's panic. One was a killer, and Poirot, with his little grey cells, was weaving a net to catch them. Chapter 6. The locked room puzzle. The rain had stopped by the 4th morning at Ashford Manor, but a heavy mist clung to the grounds, wrapping the old house in a grey shroud. I woke with a knot in my stomach, the image of Lord Reginald Ashford's body slumped over his desk, the brandy glass spilled, the sharp smell of cyanide still vivid. The manor felt like a prison, its creaking floors and shadowy corners hiding a killer. Hercule Poirot, my friend, was already up, standing by the window of our guest room, his suit neat, his moustache perfectly curled. He stared out at the misty gardens, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes sharp as ever. "Hastings," he said, turning to me, "you look troubled, mon ami. But today we unravel a puzzle, the locked room. How did the killer enter and leave a room locked from the inside? The answer is here, in the details." I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the unease. "Poirot, that locked door's been bothering me from the start. The study was sealed tight, and yet someone got in, poisoned Ashford's brandy, and got out. It's impossible." He smiled, his eyes twinkling. "Impossible, Nan Hastings. Nothing is impossible when you use the little grey cells, the door, the window, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, they all speak. Today, we listen closely." I nodded, pulling on my jacket. The will, the motives, the alibis, everything pointed to someone in this house, but the locked room was the key. How had they done it? Breakfast waited downstairs, and I braced myself for another tense meal with the suspects. The dining room was quiet, the air thick with suspicion. The tall windows let in pale light, making the silverware gleam dully on the long table. Lady Eleanor Ashford sat at the head, her blonde hair pinned up, her face pale but calm as she sipped tea. Henry Ashford slouched across from her, his dark hair messy, picking at his toast with a scowl. Clara Beaumont, the secretary, sat straight, her hands folded, but her fingers twitched nervously. Dr. Victor Langston ate quickly, his doctor's bag at his feet, his eyes cold. Margaret Poole, the housekeeper, brought in fresh coffee, her face tired but her gaze sharp. James Carver, the business rival, leaned back, smoking a cigarette, his smirk hiding something dark. Eliza Thornton, the maid, poured juice with shaky hands, jumping when Henry muttered at her to move faster. Inspector Japp was there, gulping coffee and scribbling in his notebook. He looked up as we sat down. "Morning, Poirot." My men checked the grounds again, nothing new. That locked study's got me stumped. "You got any ideas?" Poirot spread jam on his toast with care. "We Jap. The locked room is not what it seems today. We examine it again, and we watch the household. Their fear will point the way." I grabbed my notebook, my stomach grumbling despite the grim mood. As I ate, I watched the others. Lady Eleanor's spoon trembled slightly. Henry glared at her, his jaw tight. Clara's eyes flicked to Henry, then away. Dr. Langston glanced at Margaret, who looked down. James blew smoke rings, but his foot tapped under the table. Eliza nearly spilled the juice when Jap asked for more coffee. They were all on edge, and I wondered what the locked room would reveal. After breakfast, Poirot led us to the study, where the constable stood guard. The door was still locked, the key in Jap's pocket. We stepped inside, and the room felt colder than ever. The desk stood empty, Ashford's body gone to the morgue. But the spilled brandy glass, the neat papers, and the misplaced pen remained. The faint ink smudge on the blotter caught the light, and the heavy curtains hung still. By the tall window, the air smelled of old books and stale brandy. With a faint trace of that sharp cyanide, Poirot moved like a cat, his eyes darting over every detail. He knelt by the desk, sniffing the glass again. The cyanide was in the brandy, he said, poured precisely to kill quickly. But how did the killer enter? He stood and examined the door, running his fingers along the frame. The lock was sturdy, no signs of tampering. Then he moved to the window, pushing the curtains aside. The latch clicked open easily, but the window was shut tight. He paused, his fingers tracing a small scratch on the latch, the one he'd noticed. "Before this scratch," he said, "it is deliberate. But the window was not opened last night." "Curious," Jap frowned. "You're saying the killer didn't come through the window?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Perhaps, Jap, or perhaps they wished us to think so. Let us look closer." He examined the window frame, inch by inch, his fingers probing the wood. Then he stopped, his eyes widening. "Mon Dieu," he said, pointing to a tiny gap in the frame, hidden by the curtain. "This is not a window, it is a door." I gasped. "A door? In the window?" "Oui," Poirot said, pressing the frame. A faint click sounded, and a narrow panel swung inward, revealing a hidden latch. "A secret entrance, Hastings, built into the frame, disguised as part of the window. It leads to the garden." Jap's jaw dropped. "Blimey, Poirot, you're saying someone used this to get in and out?" "Precisement," Poirot said. "The door was locked from the inside, but this was the path. Someone who knew the manor well used it." I scribbled in my notebook, my heart racing. But who, Poirot? Who'd know about a secret like that? He smiled. "Someone close. To Ashford, a servant, perhaps, or a family member. We must ask who knew the manor's secrets." We stepped through the panel into the garden, where the mist was thick, the roses dripping wet. The path outside was gravel, but no clear footprints Chaudrain had washed them away. Poirot knelt, examining the ground. "No tracks," he said. "But the grass is flattened here, as if someone stood recently." Jap scratched his head. "So the killer came through this hidden door, poisoned the brandy, and left the same way. But why lock the study door?" "To confuse us," Poirot said, "to make us think it was impossible. But the pen, the smudge, the scrap, they tell us the killer was here after Ashford drank." I shivered. "You mean they stayed too tidy?" "Up, that's cold," Poirot said. "A careful killer, but not careful enough. Let us return to the house." Back inside, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room to ask about the manor's secrets. The room was warm, with a fire crackling, but the mood was icy. Lady Eleanor sat on a velvet sofa, her hands twisting her handkerchief. Henry paced by the window, his face dark. Clara sat straight, her eyes down. Dr. Langston leaned against the mantel, his bag at his feet. Margaret stood by the door, her hands clasped. James smoked, his eyes narrow. Eliza hovered in the corner, her apron twisted. "Mies, Amos," Poirot said, standing by the fire. The study was not truly locked. A hidden panel in the window allowed entry from the garden. "Who among you knew of this?" The room went still. Eleanor gasped. "A hidden panel? I had no idea." Henry snorted. "Convenient art, Eleanor. You've lived here 2 years. Surely you poked around." "Henry," she snapped. "I'm not a sneak." Clara's voice was soft. I knew the manor had old secrets. Lord Ashford mentioned hidden passages, but I never saw them." Margaret nodded. "The house is old, sir. There are stories of secret doors, but I thought they were just tales." Dr. Langston shrugged. "I'm a guest here. I don't know the house's tricks." James blew a smoke ring. "Sounds like something a rich man would have. But I'm new. Here, don't look at me." Eliza's eyes widened. I cleaned the rooms, but I never saw any hidden doors." Poirot watched them, his eyes sharp. "Mercy, your answers are noted, but secrets are known to those closest to the house. We shall see." As they left, I whispered, "Poirot, Clara, and Margaret live here. They'd know about any secret passages. And Eliza's so nervous, she might be hiding something." "We," he said. "But knowledge is not guilt. We must find proof." Jap pulled us aside. "I've got my men checking the servants' quarters. If someone used that panel, they might have left something cyanide, maybe." Poirot nodded. "Good, Jap. But the cyanide is not the only clue. The pen, out of place. The smudge, fresh. The scrap, burned. The impression, trust broken. They point to a purpose of paper, a letter, something Ashford wrote." The day wore on, with Poirot pacing the manor, examining doors, walls, even the library shelves for more hidden panels. I followed, my notebook filling with his cryptic comments. He kept returning to the study, staring at the desk, the blotter, the pen. "Something was taken," he muttered. "A document, perhaps the one Ashford meant to show us." At lunch, the household was quieter than ever. Henry drank whiskey, ignoring Eleanor's glares. Clara ate little, her eyes on Henry. Dr. Langston sat alone, his bag close. Margaret served silently, her hands steady but her face pale. James smoked, his smirk gone. Eliza dropped a spoon, blushing as she picked it up. Poirot leaned toward me. "Hastings, tonight we set another trap. I shall say we've found the hidden paper. Watch their faces." I nodded, my pulse quickening. Dinner was tense, the rain starting again, drumming on the windows. The candles flickered, casting shadows on the walls. Poirot waited until the main course roast chicken and vegetables before speaking. "Mies, Amos," he said, "we have made progress. In the study we found traces of a letter, one Lord Ashford wrote before his death. It names a betrayer. It is safe, and it will lead us to the killer." The table froze. Eleanor's fork stopped mid-air. Henry's glass shook. Clara's napkin twisted in her hands. Langston's eyes narrowed. Margaret's tray clattered. James' cigarette burned, forgotten. Eliza gasped, her hand to her mouth. Jap played along. "A letter A. That's big, Poirot. Who's it point to?" Poirot smiled. "That is for tomorrow, Jap. But the killer knows." The meal ended in silence, the suspects scattering to their rooms. Back in the study, Poirot checked the desk again, his fingers tracing the smudge. "This ink," he said, "it is rare, not common. We must find its source." I shivered. You think the killer wrote something too, or took Ashford's letter? Perhaps, he said. The locked room is solved, but the heart of the crime remains. Tomorrow we dig deeper, in our room. I sat by the fire, my notes a jumble of clues and reactions. Poirot, I said, the hidden panel changes everything. Clara, Margaret, or Elisabeth know the house best. And that letter, trust, broken, it's got to be the key. Poirot settled in his chair, his hands steepled. We, Hastings. The panel, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the impression they weave a net. The killer thought the locked room would hide them, but they left traces. Tomorrow we tighten the net. I lay in bed, the manor creaking, the rain tapping. The suspects. Faces haunted me. Eleanor's shock, Henry's anger, Clara's fear, Langston's coldness, Margaret's duty, Carver's calm, Eliza's panic. One was a killer, and Poirot's trap was closing. As they left, I whispered, Poirot, Clara and Margaret live. Here they'd know about any secret passages. And Eliza's so nervous, she might be hiding something. We, he said, but knowledge is not guilt. We must find proof. Jap pulled us aside. I've got my men checking the servants' quarters. If someone used that panel, they might have left something cyanide, maybe. Poirot nodded. Good, Jap. But the cyanide is not the only clue. The pen, out of place. The smudge, fresh. The scrap, burned. The impression, trust, broken. They point to a purposer paper, a letter, something Ashford wrote. The day wore on, with Poirot pacing the manor, examining doors, walls, even the library shelves for more hidden panels. I followed, my notebook filling with his cryptic comments. He kept returning to the study, staring at the desk, the blotter, the pen. Something was taken, he muttered. A document, perhaps the one Ashford meant to show us. At lunch, the household was quieter than ever. Henry drank whiskey, ignoring Eleanor's glares. Clara ate little, her eyes on Henry. Dr. Langston sat alone, his bag close. Margaret served silently, her hands steady but her face pale. James smoked, his smirk gone. Eliza dropped a spoon, blushing as she picked it up. Poirot leaned toward me. Hastings, tonight we set another trap. I shall say we've found the hidden paper. Watch their faces. I nodded, my pulse quickening. Dinner was tense, the rain starting again, drumming on the windows. The candles flickered, casting shadows on the walls. Poirot waited until the main course roast chicken and vegetables before speaking. Mies Amos, he said, we have made progress. In the study we found traces of a letter, one Lord Ashford wrote before his death. It names a betrayer. It is safe, and it will lead us to the killer. The table froze. Eleanor's fork stopped mid-air. Henry's glass shook. Clara's napkin twisted in her hands. Langston's eyes narrowed. Margaret's tray clattered. James' cigarette burned, forgotten. Eliza gasped, her hand to her mouth. Jap played along. A letter A. That's big, Poirot. Who's it point to? Poirot smiled. That is for tomorrow, Jap. But the killer knows. The meal ended in silence, the suspects scattering to their rooms. Back in the study, Poirot checked the desk again, his fingers tracing the smudge. This ink, he said, it is rare, not common. We must find its source. I shivered. You think the killer wrote something too, or took Ashford's letter? Perhaps, he said. The locked room is solved, but the heart of the crime remains. Tomorrow we dig deeper, in our room. I sat by the fire, my notes a jumble of clues and reactions. "Poirot," I said, "the hidden panel changes everything. Clara, Margaret, or Elisabeth know the house best. And that letter, trust, broken, it's got to be the key." Poirot settled in his chair, his hands steepled. "We, Hastings." The panel, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the impression they weave a net. The killer thought the locked room would hide them, but they left traces. Tomorrow we tighten the net. I lay in bed, the manor creaking, the rain tapping. The suspects. Faces haunted me. Eleanor's shock, Henry's anger, Clara's fear, Langston's coldness, Margaret's duty, Carver's calm, Eliza's panic. One was a killer, and Poirot's trap was closing. Chapter 7. A hidden letter. The 5th morning at Ashford Manor brought a pale sun that barely pierced the mist hanging over the gardens. I woke with a start, my dreams tangled with images of Lord Reginald Ashford's lifeless body, the spilled brandy glass, and the sharp sting of cyanide in the air. The manor felt like a maze of secrets, its old walls creaking with lies. Hercule Poirot, my friend, was already up, standing by the fireplace in our guest room, his suit crisp, his moustache perfectly curled. He held a small notebook, jotting down thoughts with his neat, fussy handwriting, his eyes sharp as a blade. "Hastings," he said, glancing up, "you sleep like a man haunted by shadows. But today we chase a lighter letter, perhaps, that Lord Ashford meant to show us. The scrap, the smudge, the impression they point to words he left behind. We must find them." I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the fog of unease. "Poirot, that trust scrap, and the blotter impression, trust broken, they're driving me mad. If there's a letter, where is it? And how does it help us catch the killer?" He smiled, his eyes twinkling. "The letter is the heart, mon ami. It holds Ashford's fears, his betrayer. The locked room is solved, but the motive hides in his words. Today we search, and we watch the household. Their fear will betray them." I nodded, pulling on my jacket. The hidden panel in the study window, the misplaced pen, the ink smudge, the burned scrapple pointed to someone close to Ashford. Breakfast waited downstairs, and I braced myself for another tense meal with the suspects, knowing Poirot's sharp eyes would miss nothing. The dining room was quiet, the air heavy with suspicion. The tall windows let in weak light, making the silverware glint dully on the long table. Lady Eleanor Ashford sat at the head, her blonde hair pinned tightly, her face pale as she sipped tea. Henry Ashford slouched across from her, his dark hair messy, picking at his eggs with a scowl. Clara Beaumont, the secretary, sat straight, her hands folded, but her fingers twitched nervously. Dr. Victor Langston ate quickly, his doctor's bag at his feet, his jaw tight. Margaret Poole, the housekeeper, brought in fresh toast, her face tired but her eye sharp. James Carver, the business rival, leaned back, smoking a cigarette, his smirk hiding something dark. Eliza Thornton, the maid, poured coffee with shaky hands, jumping when Henry snapped at her to hurry. Inspector Japp was there, gulping tea and flipping through his notebook. He looked up as we sat down. "Morning, Poirot. My men searched the servants' quarters. Nothing yet. No cyanide. No papers. That hidden panel's a game changer, though. You got any leads on this letter you keep talking about?" Poirot spread butter on his toast with care. "We, Japp. The letter is the key. The scrap with trust. The impression with trust. Broken, they are fragments of Ashford's last words. We must find the whole, and we must watch those who fear it. I grabbed my notebook, my stomach growling despite the grim mood. As I ate, I watched the others. Lady Eleanor's spoon trembled slightly. Henry glared at her, his jaw tight. Clara's eyes flicked to Henry, then away. Dr. Langston glanced at Margaret, who looked down. James blew smoke rings, but his foot tapped under the table. Eliza nearly spilled the coffee when Jap asked for more. They were all on edge, and I wondered what a hidden letter would reveal. After breakfast, Poirot led us to the drawing room, where he planned to question the household about any papers Ashford might have left. The room was warm, with a fire crackling in the hearth, but the mood was icy. Portraits of stern Ashfords glared from the walls, their eyes following us. Poirot sat in an armchair, motioning for me to sit beside him with my notebook. "Hastings," he said, "write every word, every glance. The letter is near, and someone knows it." Before we could begin, Eliza slipped into the room, her face pale, her hands trembling. She glanced around, then approached Poirot, her voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Poirot, sir, I found something. I didn't know what to do, but you should have it." She held out a crumpled piece of paper, folded tightly, her fingers shaking as she handed it to him. Poirot's eyes lit up, but he kept his voice calm. "Mercy, Mademoiselle Thornton, where did you find this?" "In Lord Ashford's desk," she said, her eyes wide. "It was tucked in a drawer, behind some books. I was dusting this morning, and I saw it. I didn't tell anyone else." Poirot nodded, dismissing her gently. "You did well. Say nothing of this. As Eliza hurried out, I leaned over. "Poirot, is that the letter? The one Ashford wrote?" He unfolded the paper carefully, his hands steady. "Let us see, mon ami." The letter was incomplete, a single page in Ashford's neat handwriting, addressed to Poirot. I read over his shoulder, my heart pounding. "My dear Mr. Poirot, I fear I am in danger. A betrayal has come to light, a trust broken. There is a forged document, one that threatens my legacy. I cannot say more now, but I beg you to uncover the truth. If I am harmed, look to those closest to me. They know more than they say. Yours, Reginald Ashford." The letter ended abruptly, as if he'd been interrupted. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "This is what he meant to give us. A betrayal, a forged document. This is the heart of the crime." Jap, who'd joined us, peered at the letter. "Blimey, Poirot. This changes everything. A forged document. Who's he talking about?" Poirot folded the letter carefully, slipping it into his pocket. "That, Jap, is what we must discover. But we keep this secret for now. The killer does not know we have it." I scribbled in my notebook, my mind racing. Poirot, the trust. Scrap, the blotter impression, they match this letter. But why was it hidden? And who's the betrayer? "Someone close," Poirot said. "The hidden panel, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the impression. And now this letter, they point to a plan. We must question Eliza further, but carefully. She is frightened." We called Eliza back, meeting her in the quiet library to avoid prying eyes. The room smelled of old books and polish, the shelves towering around us. Eliza stood by the door, twisting her apron, her eyes wide. "Miss Thornton," Poirot said gently, "you were brave to bring me the letter. Tell me, when did you find it? This morning?" she said, her voice shaking. "I was dusting the study, like I do every day. I moved some books, and it fell out. I recognized Lord Ashford's writing. You did not show it to anyone? Poirot asked. No, sir, she said. I was scared, after what happened. I thought you'd know what to do. Poirot nodded. And you knew Lord Ashford well? He was kind, she said, her eyes tearing up. He gave me this job when no one else would. I'm his niece, sir, his sister's daughter. He never told anyone, but I am. I gasped, nearly dropping my pencil. His niece. Why keep it secret? Eliza's cheeks flushed. My mother ran away years ago, shamed the family. Lord Ashford took me in, but he didn't want people talking. I was just the maid to them. Poirot's eyes softened. Merci, mademoiselle. You have helped greatly. Say nothing of this. She left, I whispered Poirot. She's family. That's a motive maybe, she wanted the inheritance. Perhaps, he said. But her fear is real. She is not the killer, I think, but she knows more. We must watch her. The day unfolded with Poirot moving through the manor, his eyes sharp, his questions subtle. He spoke to each suspect, dropping hints about papers to gauge their reactions. In the drawing room, Lady Eleanor clutched her handkerchief, her face pale when Poirot mentioned hidden documents. I don't know anything about papers, she said, her voice sharp. Reginald never shared his business with me. Henry, in the library, scoffed when asked about letters. If he wrote something, Eleanor probably burned it to cover her. Tracks, he said, his eyes dark dot. Clara, in her office, hesitated when Poirot asked about Ashford's papers. He wrote a lot, she said. Letters, notes, but I didn't see anything special. Dr. Langston, in the garden, gripped his bag tightly. I'm a doctor, not a clerk, he snapped. I don't know about any letters. Margaret, in the kitchen, shook her head. He kept his papers locked away. I only cleaned around them. James Carver, on the terrace, smirked. Sounds like Ashford was paranoid. No surprise, with his deals. Poirot watched them all, his mind working like a clock. At lunch, the tension was thicker than ever. Henry drank heavily, glaring at Eleanor. Clara avoided his gaze, her hands shaking. Langston ate alone, his bag close. Margaret served silently, her eyes darting. James smoked, his smirk gone. Eliza dropped a plate, blushing as she cleaned it up. Poirot leaned toward me. Hastings, tonight we set a trap. I shall say the letter is safe in my room. We shall see. Who comes looking? I nodded, my heart racing. Dinner was grim, the rain drumming outside, the candles flickering. Poirot waited until dessert apple tart before speaking. Mies Amos, he said, we have found a letter written by Lord Ashford before his death. It speaks of betrayal and a forged document. It is safe, and it will name the killer. The table froze. Eleanor's spoon clattered. Henry's glass shook. Clara's napkin twisted. Langston's eyes narrowed. Margaret's tray wobbled. James' cigarette burned forgotten. Eliza gasped, her hand to her mouth. Jap played along. A letter, Poirot. That's big. Where's it now? In my room, Poirot said, his eyes sharp. Under lock and key. The meal ended in silence, the suspects scattering. Back in our room, Poirot placed a dummy letter of folded paper with nonsense words in a drawer, leaving it slightly ajar. We watch tonight, Hastings, he said. The killer will come. We sat by the fire, the manor creaking, the mist pressing against the windows. Hours passed, my eyes heavy. Then a soft creak in the hall. Poirot held up a hand, his eyes alert. The door handle turned slowly, then stopped. Footsteps faded. We rushed to the hall, but it was empty. Monsieur Poirot said, "They are clever, but not clever enough." I shivered. "Who was it, Poirot?" "We shall see," he said. "The letter, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the impression, the panel they weave a net. Tomorrow we tighten it." In bed, I stared at the ceiling, the suspects' faces swirling Eleanor's shock. Henry's rage, Clara's fear, Langston's coldness, Margaret's duty, Carver's calm, Eliza's panic. The letter was a key, but to what? One was a killer, and Poirot's trap was closing. Chapter 8. The business rival, the sixth morning at Ashford Manor, greeted us with a weak sun struggling through heavy clouds, casting a pale glow over the misty gardens. I woke with a jolt, my dreams haunted by Lord Reginald Ashford's lifeless face, the spilled brandy, and the sharp whiff of cyanide. The manor felt like a trap, its creaking floors and shadowy corners hiding a killer's secrets. Hercule Poirot, my friend, was already up, standing by the window of our guest room, his suit crisp, his moustache perfectly curled. He stared out at the fog, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Hastings," he said, turning to me, "you sleep like a man chased by ghosts. But today we chase a man, James Carver, the business rival. His calm is a mask, Nan. We shall see what lies beneath." I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear the fog of unease. "Poirot, Carver's too smooth, always smirking, but he's got a motive. His deal with Ashford fell apart. And that letter about betrayal, could it point to him?" Poirot smiled, his eyes twinkling. "Precisement, mon ami. The letter, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the hidden panel, they weave a story. Carver's business was failing, and Ashford's death may save him. Today we dig deeper, and we watch the others. Their fear will speak." I nodded, pulling. On my jacket, the hidden letter, with its talk of a forged document and betrayal, had set my mind racing. Carver's cool demeanor stood out against the others' nerves, and I wondered what he was hiding. Breakfast waited downstairs, and I braced myself for another tense meal with the suspects, knowing Poirot's sharp eyes would miss nothing. The dining room was quiet, the air thick with suspicion. The tall windows let in dim light, making the silverware glint dully on the long table. Lady Eleanor Ashford sat at the head, her blonde hair pinned tightly, her face pale as she sipped tea. Henry Ashford slouched across from her, his dark hair messy, picking at his toast with a scowl. Clara Beaumont, the secretary, sat straight, her hands folded, but her fingers twitched nervously. Dr. Victor Langston ate quickly, his doctor's bag at his feet, his jaw tight. Margaret Poole, the housekeeper, brought in fresh coffee, her face tired but her eyes sharp. James Carver leaned back, smoking a cigarette, his smirk hiding something dark. Eliza Thornton, the maid, poured juice with shaky hands, jumping when Henry snapped at her to hurry. Inspector Japp was there, gulping coffee and flipping through his notebook. He looked up as we sat down. "Morning, Poirot. My men are still searching, no sign of that cyanide yet. You still think Carver's worth a look? He's got motive, but he's slippery." Poirot spread jam on his toast with care. "We Jap, Monsieur Carver, is too calm, too certain. A man who smiles in a murder investigation hides something. Today we follow him, and we search the garden again. The hidden panel leads. There perhaps it holds more secrets." I grabbed my notebook, my stomach growling despite the heavy mood. As I ate, I watched the others. Lady Eleanor's spoon trembled slightly. Henry glared at her, his jaw tight. Clara's eyes flicked to Henry, then away. Dr. Langston glanced at Margaret, who looked down. James blew smoke rings, but his foot tapped under the table. Elisa nearly spilled the juice when Jap asked for more coffee. They were all on edge, but Carver's coolness stood out, like a man who knew more than he let on. After breakfast, Poirot led us to the garden, where the hidden panel in the study window opened. The mist was thick, the roses dripping wet, the gravel path slick underfoot. Poirot knelt by the panel's exit, his eyes scanning the ground. The grass is flattened. Here, he said, pointing to a patch near the roses. Someone stood here recently, perhaps the night of the murder. Jap frowned. No footprints, though. The rain washed them away. We, Poirot said, but look closer. He brushed aside some leaves, revealing a small, glinting object. Half buried in the dirt, a glass vial, no bigger than a thimble, with a faint residue inside. Mon Dieu, he said, lifting it with a handkerchief. This is cyanide, I wager. The killer dropped it, perhaps in haste. I gasped, scribbling. In my notebook. Poirot, this is huge. The cyanide right by the panel. But who dropped it? Jap's eyes lit up. That's evidence, Poirot. We'll test it for prints. But this points to someone who used the panel, someone who knew about it. Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching. And who was in the garden that night? Monsieur Carver claims he was, smoking on the terrace nearby. We must question him again. We returned to the manor, where Poirot called Carver to the library. The room was quiet, the shelves towering with books, the air smelling of old paper and polish. Carver sauntered in, his cigarette dangling, his smirk firmly in place. He sat with a casual air, crossing his legs. What now, Poirot? He said. More questions about where I was. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Monsieur Carver, you were on the terrace the night of the murder, Nan, near the garden where the hidden panel leads. Carver shrugged. Sure, I told you, I was smoking. Saw nothing, heard nothing. And yet, Poirot said, holding up the vial wrapped in his handkerchief, we found this in the garden, near the panel. A vial of cyanide. Curious, is it not? Carver's smirk faltered, just for a second. Never seen it before, he said, his voice steady but his eyes narrowing. You trying to pin this on me? Poirot smiled. I pin nothing, monsieur. I seek the truth. Your business with Lord Ashfordette failed, yes. A great loss for you. Carver blew a smoke ring. Business is business. Deals fall through. I didn't kill him over it. Jap leaned in. Your company's in trouble, Carver. Word from London says you're near bankrupt. Ashford's death clears your debts, doesn't it, Carver's? Jaw tightened. You've got no proof. I was on the terrace, not in the garden. Mercy, Poirot said. You may go. As Carver left, I whispered Poirot. He flinched when you showed the vial. He's hiding something. We, Poirot said. But the violet feels too convenient. None. As if someone wished us to find it. We must test it, but we must also watch the others. Jap sent the vial to his men for testing, and Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room to gauge their reactions. The room was warm, with a fire crackling, but the mood was icy. Lady Eleanor sat on a velvet sofa, her handkerchief twisted. Henry paced by the window, his face dark. Clara sat straight, her eyes down. Dr. Langston leaned against the mantel, his bag close. Margaret stood by the door, her hands clasped. Eliza hovered in the corner, her apron twisted. Mes amis, Poirot said, standing by the fire. We have found a clue in the garden, a vial of cyanide near the hidden panel. It suggests the killer used that path to enter the study. Who among you was in the garden that night? The room went still. Eleanor gasped. Cyanide. That's awful. I was in my room, nowhere near the garden. Henry snorted. Sure, Aunt Eleanor. You'd say anything to save yourself. Henry, she snapped. I'm not a murderer. Clara's voice was soft. I was in my office, typing. I didn't go outside. Dr. Langston shrugged. Told you I was in the garden earlier, getting air. But I didn't see any vial. Margaret nodded. I was in the kitchen. I don't go to the garden at night. James smirked. I was on the terrace, like I said. If that vial's mine, someone's framing me. Eliza's eyes widened. I was upstairs, cleaning. I never go to the garden. Poirot watched them, his eyes sharp. Mercy, your answers are noted, but the vial speaks, and we shall listen. As they left, I whispered, Poirot, Carver's the only one who admits being near the garden. And Langston was there too. Could they be working together? Perhaps, Poirot said. Or the vial is a trick to point us at Carver. We must return to the study. Back in the study, Poirot examined the desk again, his fingers tracing. The ink smudge on the blotter. This smudge, he said, it matches the letter's ink. Ashford wrote of betrayal, a forged document. The vial may be a distraction, but the letter is the heart. He rummaged through the drawers, finding nothing new, then paused at the window, checking the hidden panel. The panel was used, he said, but the violet was placed, not dropped. Someone wants us to suspect Carver. I shivered. You think it's a frame-up? We, Poirot said. A clever killer hides their tracks. We must question Langston, again his access to poisons is too convenient. We found Langston. In the garden, clutching his bag, he glared as we approached. What now, Poirot? I told you, I was getting air that night. Poirot held up the vial. This was found where you walked, Dr. Cyanide, like that which killed Lord Ashford. Langston's face paled, but his voice was steady. Not mine. I'm a doctor, not a poisoner. Your bag, Poirot said. May we see it? Langston clutched it tighter. It's private. You've no right. Japp stepped in. We can get a warrant, Doctor. Open it. Reluctantly, Langston opened the bag, revealing medical tools, bottles, and papers, but no cyanide. Eyes narrowed. Mercy, Doctor. You may go. As Langston left, I said, he's nervous, Poirot, but no cyanide. Maybe he hid it, or someone else did, Poirot said. The vial is a clue, but not the truth. We must watch them all. At dinner, the tension was thicker than ever. The rain had started again, drumming on the windows, the candles flickering. Poirot waited until dessert plum pudding before. Speaking me as Amos, he said. The vial of cyanide points to the garden, to the hidden panel, but it also points to a clever mind, one that seeks to mislead. We are close to the truth. The table froze. Eleanor's spoon clattered and Ree's glass shook. Clara's napkin twisted. Langston's eyes narrowed. Margaret's tray wobbled. James' cigarette burned, forgotten. Eliza gasped, her hand to her mouth. Japp played along. Close, a Poirot. You think the killer's getting nervous? Oui, Poirot said. They feel the net tightening. The meal ended in silence, the suspects scattering. Back in our room, Poirot paced by the fire. The vial is a trick, Hastings, but it tells us something. The killer knows the garden, the panel. Carver is a target. But is he the killer, or is it Langston, with his poisons, or another, hiding in plain sight? I sat with my notes, my head spinning. Poirot, the letter, the vial, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the panel, they're all connected. But how, and who's framing who? Poirot settled in his chair, his hands steepled. The letter speaks of betrayal, a forged document. The vial points to the garden. The pen, the smudge, the scrap, they're traces of the truth. Tomorrow we tighten the net. I lay in bed, the manor creaking, the rain tapping. The suspects' faces swirled. Lennell's shock, Henry's rage, Clara's fear, Langston's coldness, Margaret's duty, Carver's calm, Eliza's panic. One was a killer, and Poirot's trap was closing. Chapter 9. Tensions rise. The 7th morning at Ashford Manor dawned with a cold, grey light that barely broke through the heavy clouds. The mist had lifted, but the air felt thick, as if the manor itself was holding its breath. I woke with a knot in my stomach, haunted by the image of Lord Reginald Ashford's lifeless body, the spilled brandy glass, and the sharp sting of cyanide. The hidden letter, the cyanide vial in the garden, the misplaced pen, the ink smudge, and the burned scrap with trust scrawled on it swelled in my mind. Hercule Poirot, my friend, was already up, standing by the fireplace in our guest room, his suit crisp, his moustache perfectly curled. He held a small notebook, jotting thoughts with his neat handwriting, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. "Hastings," he said, glancing up, "you sleep like a man trapped in a storm. But today we stir the waters. The suspects are nervous, their secrets bubbling up. We shall test them with a little deception and see who cracks." I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the unease. Poirot, that cyanide vial, and the letter about betrayal, they're big clues, but everyone's still lying. Carver's too calm, Langston's too cold, and Eliza's scared stiff. "What's this test you're planning?" He smiled, his eyes twinkling. "A simple trick, mon ami. We place a false clue, a handkerchief, perhaps with a monogram, and leave it where they can find it. The guilty will react, showing their hand. The letter, the vial, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the hidden panel, they point to a killer. Among us, today, we push them." I nodded, pulling on my jacket. The manor felt like a cage, its creaking floors and shadowy corners hiding a murderer. The letter's words, trust broken, forged document, and the vial by the secret panel suggested someone close to Ashford, someone who knew the house's secrets. Breakfast waited downstairs, and I braced myself for another tense meal, knowing Poirot's sharp eyes would catch every flinch. The dining room was silent, the air heavy with suspicion. The tall windows let in pale light, making the silverware glint dully on the long table. Lady Eleanor Ashford sat at the head, her blonde hair pinned tightly, her face pale as she sipped tea, her spoon trembling slightly. Henry Ashford slouched across from her, his dark hair messy, picking at his eggs with a scowl. Clara Beaumont, the secretary, sat straight, her hands folded, but her fingers twitched nervously. Dr. Victor Langston ate quickly, his doctor's bag at his feet, his jaw tight. Margaret Poole, the housekeeper, brought in fresh toast, her face tired but her eyes sharp. James Carver leaned back, smoking a cigarette, his smirk hiding something dark. Eliza Thornton, the maid, poured coffee with shaky hands, jumping when Henry snapped at her to hurry. Inspector Japp was there, gulping coffee and flipping through his notebook. He looked up as we sat down. "Morning, Poirot. The vials being tested? No prints yet, but it's definitely cyanide. Your trap last night didn't catch anyone. What's next?" Poirot spread butter on his toast with care. "Patience, Japp. The killer is cautious, but not perfect. Today, we test them with a clue, and we watch. The guilty cannot hide forever." I grabbed my notebook, my stomach growling despite the grim mood. As I ate, I watched the others. Lady Eleanor's spoon clinked against her cup, her eyes red. Henry glared at her, his jaw tight. Clara's eyes flicked to Henry, then away. Dr. Langston glanced at Margaret, who looked down. James blew smoke rings, but his foot tapped under the table. Eliza nearly spilled the coffee when Japp asked for more. They were all nervous, and I wondered how Poirot's trap would shake them. After breakfast, Poirot led us to the hall, a grand space with polished wood floors and stern portraits of Ashford's past. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, monogrammed with a bold C, and placed it on a side table near the staircase, where anyone passing could see it. "This," he said, "is our bait." The C could stand for Carver, Clara, or even a stranger. We shall see who takes it. I scribbled in my notebook, my heart racing. "Poirot, that's clever. If someone grabs it, they're worried. It points to them." "We," he said, his mustache twitching. "The guilty will act. Now, we watch." We retreated to the library, where we could see the hall through a crack in the door. The room was quiet, the shelves towering with books, the air smelling of old paper and polish. Poirot sat by the fire, his eyes fixed on the hall. I stood beside him, my notebook ready. Hours passed, the manor creaking, the clouds outside darkening. Then, footsteps, soft, hesitant. Clara appeared, pausing by the table. She glanced around, then picked up the handkerchief, her hands shaking. She stuffed it into her pocket and hurried away. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "Mademoiselle Beaumont takes the bait." "But why?" I gasped. "Poirot, she's scared. Does this mean she's the killer?" "Not yet," he said. "But she fears the sea points to her. We must speak with her." We found Clara in her office, a small room next to the study, filled with papers and a typewriter. She was typing, her face pale, her hands trembling. The handkerchief was gone, hidden or destroyed. Poirot knocked gently and entered, his voice calm. "Mademoiselle Beaumont," he said, "we must talk." "You found a handkerchief in the hall, Nan." Clara's eyes widened, her hands freezing on the keys. I don't know what you mean, Mr. Poirot." He smiled, his eyes sharp. "Come, mademoiselle, I saw you take it. The sea, it means something to you. Clara, perhaps, or another, her." Cheeks flushed. I thought it was mine. I lost one like it. That's all." Poirot leaned forward. "And yet you hid it. Why? What do you fear?" She bit her lip, tears welling. "I'm not the killer. I took it because I was scared it might look bad. I love Henry, and he's in trouble. I didn't want anything to make it worse." Poirot nodded. "Merci, mademoiselle, but the truth will come out. Keep nothing else from us." As she left, I whispered, "Poirot, she's protecting Henry, but that handkerchief, why panic over it?" "Fear Hastings," he said. "She fears for Henry, or for herself. The sea could be hers, or carvers, or a trick. We must watch her closely. The day dragged on, with Poirot moving through the manor, his eyes sharp, his questions subtle. He spoke to each suspect, dropping hints about the handkerchief to gauge their reactions. In the drawing room, Lady Eleanor clutched her own handkerchief, her face pale. A monogrammed cloth, she said. I've never seen one with a C. Henry. In the library, scoffed. Sounds like you're grasping at straws, Poirot, trying to frame someone. Dr. Langston, in the garden, gripped his bag. A handkerchief. I don't bother with such things. Margaret, in the kitchen, shook her head. I cleaned the linens. No sea handkerchiefs here. James Carver, on the terrace, smirked. AC, huh? Could be mine, but I don't lose. Things, Eliza, upstairs, blushed when asked. I don't know anything about it, sir. Poirot watched them all, his mind working like a clock. At lunch, the tension boiled over. Henry, his face flushed from whiskey, slammed his glass. Down, this is ridiculous, he shouted, pointing at Eleanor. She's got the money, the motive, and you're chasing handkerchiefs. Eleanor stood, her voice icy. You're drunk, Henry. Accusing me won't bring Reginald back. Clara touched Henry's arm. Please, stop. He shook her off, storming. Out. Poirot watched, his eyes narrow. The net tightens. Hastings, he murmured. The handkerchief was a spark, and Clara burned. After lunch, Poirot returned to the study, his focus on the desk, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the letter, the vial all swirled in my mind. He examined the blotter again, the faint impression of trust broken still there. This letter, he said, it was taken or burned, but its shadow remains. The killer feared it. He rummaged through the drawers, finding a small key taped under one. Aha, he said, holding it up. This opens something, a box, a safe. We must find it. We searched the study, checking shelves, panels, even. The fireplace. Behind a row of books, Poirot found a small locked box, its metal surface scratched. The key fit perfectly, and inside was a single paper draft of the new will. With notes in Ashford's handwriting, Eleanor must be protected. Henry cannot be trusted, I gasped. Poirot, this proves Henry's motive. He lost everything. Oui, Poirot said, but it also proves Ashford's fear. The letter spoke of betrayal, a forged document. This draft, it is not the whole story. Jap, who'd joined us, frowned. You think the will's fake? Clara typed itchy. Could have forged it, perhaps, Poirot said. Or someone else. We must test the ink, the signature, and we must watch Clara. At dinner, the tension was thicker than ever. The rain drummed outside, the candles flickering. Poirot waited until dessert custard before speaking. Mes amis, he said, we have found a draft of the will, with notes of betrayal. It is safe, and it points to the killer. The table froze. Eleanor's spoon clattered. Henry's glass shook. Clara's napkin twisted. Langston's eyes narrowed. Margaret's tray wobbled. James' cigarette burned, forgotten. Elisa gasped, her hand to her mouth. Jap played along. A draft, eh? That's big, Poirot. Who's it name? Not yet, Poirot said. But the killer knows. The meal ended in silence, the suspects scattering. Back in our room, Poirot paced by the fire. The handkerchief was a test. Hastings and Clara failed. The draft, the letter, the vial, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the panel, they weave a net. Someone forged a document, betrayed Ashford. Tomorrow we tighten the net. I sat with my notes, my head spinning. Poirot, Clara's scared, Henry's angry, and that draft it points to them. But what about Carver or Langston? The vials still out there. Chapter 10. The motive revealed. The 8th morning at Ashford Manor broke with a chilly wind rattling the windows, as if the house itself was restless. I woke with a heavy heart, the images of Lord Reginald Ashford's lifeless body, the spilled brandy glass, and the sharp smell of cyanide still vivid in my mind. The hidden letter, the cyanide vial in the garden, the misplaced pen, the ink smudge, the burned scrap with trust, and the draft will with its damning notes swirled in my thoughts. Hercule Poirot, my friend, was already up, standing by. The fireplace in our guest room, his suit crisp, his moustache perfectly curled. He held a small notebook, his neat handwriting filling the pages, his eyes sharp as a blade. "Hastings," he said, glancing up, "you sleep like a man lost in a fog, but today we clear the mist. The motive for Lord Ashford's murder lies in his secrets, a forged document, a betrayal. The letter, the vial, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the panel, the draft, they point to the truth. We shall confront the household and watch them break." I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the unease. Poirot, Clara's scared, Henry's furious, and that draft will points to him. But Carver's too calm, and Langston's got access to poisons. "What's this confrontation you're planning?" He smiled, his eyes twinkling. "A gathering, mon ami. We bring them together, reveal the clues, and press them. The guilty will fall to fear. Anger, a glance, will betray them. The motive is tied to the will, the letter, and the forged document. Today we find it." I nodded, pulling on my jacket. The manor felt like a tightening noose, its creaking floors and shadowy corners hiding a killer. The letters, words, trust, broken, forged document, and the cyanide vial suggested a calculated crime, one driven by greed or revenge. Breakfast waited downstairs, and I braced myself for another tense meal, knowing Poirot's sharp eyes would catch every flinch. The dining room was silent, the air thick with dread. The tall windows let in pale light, making the silverware glint dully on the long table. Lady Eleanor Ashford sat at the head, her blonde hair pinned tightly, her face pale as she sipped tea, her spoon trembling slightly. Henry Ashford slouched across from her, his dark hair messy, picking at his toast with a scowl. Clara Beaumont, the secretary, sat straight, her hands folded, but her fingers twitched nervously. Dr. Victor Langston ate quickly, his doctor's bag at his feet, his jaw tight. Margaret Poole, the housekeeper, brought in fresh coffee, her face tired but her eyes sharp. James Carver leaned back, smoking a cigarette, his smirk hiding something dark. Eliza Thornton, the maid, poured juice with shaky hands, jumping when Henry snapped at her to hurry. Inspector Japp was there, gulping coffee and flipping through his notebook. He looked up as we sat down. "Morning, Poirot." The lab confirmed the vial's cyanide, but no prints. "Your handkerchief trick got Clara, but she's not talking. What's next?" Poirot spread jam on his toast with care. "Today, Japp, we gather the household and reveal what we know: the letter, the vial, the draft. The killer will feel the pressure and make a mistake. The motive is near." I grabbed my notebook, my stomach growling despite the grim mood. As I ate, I watched the others. Lady Eleanor's spoon clinked against her cup, her eyes red. Henry glared at her, his jaw tight. Clara's eyes flicked to Henry, then away. Dr. Langston glanced at Margaret, who looked down. James blew smoke rings, but his foot tapped under the table. Eliza nearly spilled the juice when Jap asked for more coffee. They were all on edge, and I wondered how Poirot's plan would shake them. After breakfast, Poirot called the household to the drawing room for a formal gathering. The room was warm, with a fire crackling in the hearth, but the mood was icy. Portraits of stern Ashfords glared from the walls, their eyes following us. Poirot stood by the fire, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice calm but firm. Sat beside him, my notebook ready, my heart pounding. Lady Eleanor sat on a velvet sofa, her handkerchief twisted. Henry paced by the window, his face dark. Clara sat straight, her eyes down. Dr. Langston leaned against the mantel, his bag close. Margaret stood by the door, her hands clasped. James smoked, his eyes narrow. Eliza hovered in the corner, her apron twisted. Mies Amos, Poirot began. We are close to the truth of Lord Ashford's murder. Let us review. He was poisoned with cyanide in his brandy, in a study locked from the inside. A hidden panel in the window allowed entry from the garden. A vial of cyanide was found there, suggesting the killer's path. A letter, found by Mademoiselle Thornton, spoke of a betrayal and a forged document. A draft will, hidden in a locked box, named Henry as untrustworthy. A pen out of place, and an ink smudge on the blotter point to a missing paper. A burned scrap with trust completes the puzzle. Someone in this room killed Lord Ashford, and the motive lies in these clues. The room went still, the only sound the crackling fire. Eleanor gasped, her hand to her chest. A forged document. That's absurd. I loved Reginald. Henry's face reddened. You're pointing at me, Poirot. That draft's nonsense. Eleanor tricked him into changing the will. Clara's voice trembled. I typed the will, but I didn't forge anything, I swear. Dr. Langston crossed his arms. This is ridiculous. I'm a doctor, not a forger. Margaret shook her head. I served him faithfully. I'd never harm him. James smirked. Sounds like a family mess. I'm just a businessman. Eliza's eyes widened. I only found the letter. I didn't do anything. Poirot raised a hand. Silence, please. The motive is clear: greed, revenge, or fear of exposure. The forged document, mentioned in the letter, threatened someone's future. Who among you had reason to fear Ashford's words? The tension broke like a dam. Henry rounded on Eleanor. You forged it, didn't you? You got him to sign everything to you. Eleanor stood, her voice sharp. How dare you? I didn't need to forge anything. He loved me. Clara clutched Henry's arm. Stop it, Henry. You're making it worse. Langston snorted. This is a circus. You've got no proof, Poirot. Margaret's hands shook. I don't know about any documents. I just gleaned, James. Blew a smoke ring. Keep chasing shadows, Poirot. You won't pin this on me. Eliza burst into tears. I didn't do anything. I'm just his niece. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mercy for your candor, but one of you lies. The letter was hidden, the vial placed, the will drafted. Someone feared Ashford's truth. Jap stepped forward. Right, Poirot. Let's search their rooms. If there's a forged document, it's here. The search began with Jap's men, combing the manor. Poirot and I started in Clara's office, where papers were stacked neatly beside her typewriter. Poirot examined the typewriter, then the ink bottle. "This ink," he said. "It matches the smudge on the blotter." Clara typed something, perhaps the forged document. I gasped. "You think she's the forger?" "Perhaps," he said. "Or she typed it for another. We must find it." In Henry's room, we found bedding slips and debt notices, but no documents. Eleanor's room had jewels and letters, but nothing forged. Langston's bag held medical supplies, no papers. Margaret's quarters were bare, her Bible open on a table. James' suitcase had contracts, but nothing suspicious. Eliza's room had a locked diary, which Poirot opened with a small tool. Inside, a note in Ashford's hand. "Eliza, my niece, you are safe with me." I shivered. Poirot, she's definitely family. But why hide it? Shame, perhaps, he said, or fear of exposure. But she is not the killer. The search yielded no forged document, but Poirot's eyes were sharp. "The killer hid it well," he said, "or destroyed it. But the typewriter's ink is a clue." At dinner, the tension was unbearable. The rain drummed outside, the candles flickering. Poirot waited until desert-baked apples before speaking. "Mes amis," he said, "we have found the ink that matches the smudge. It comes from Mademoiselle Beaumont's typewriter. The forged document is near, and the killer is among us." The table froze. Eleanor's spoon clattered. Henry's glass shook. Clara's napkin twisted, her face pale. Langston's eyes narrowed. Margaret's tray wobbled. James' cigarette burned forgotten. Elisa gasped, her hand to her mouth. Jap played along. "The typewriter, A. That's big, Poirot. Who's it point to?" "Not yet," Poirot said, "but the killer knows." The meal ended in silence, the suspects scattering. Back in our room, Poirot paced by the fire. "The ink ties Clara to the smudge, Hastings, but she may be a pawn. The letter, the vial, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the panel, the draft, they point to a mastermind. Someone forged a document to secure the will." I sat with my notes, my head spinning. Poirot, Clara's scared, Henry's desperate. Eleanor's rich, Langston's cold, Margaret's loyal, Carver's slick, Eliza's hiding. The ink's a clue, but who's behind it? Poirot settled in his chair, his hands steepled. "The motive is greed or fear, Hastings. The forged document changed the will, betrayed Ashford. The vial, the panel, the letter, they are tools of deception. Tomorrow we confront the killer." I lay in bed, the manor creaking, the rain tapping. The suspects' faces swirled in it. Shock, Henry's rage, Clara's fear, Langston's coldness, Margaret's duty, Carver's calm, Eliza's panic. One was a killer, and Poirot's net was tightening. Chapter 11. The net closes the 9th morning at Ashford Manor, broke with a biting wind that howled through the trees, rattling the windows of the old house like an angry ghost. I woke with a start, my heart heavy with the weight of Lord Reginald. Ashford's murder, the image of his lifeless body slumped over his desk. The spilled brandy glass and the sharp sting of cyanide still vivid in my mind. The hidden letter, the cyanide vial in the garden, the misplaced pen, the ink smudge, the burned scrap with trust, the draft will, and the typewriter's ink had woven a tangled web of clues. Hercule Poirot, my friend, was already up, standing by the fireplace in our guest room, his suit crisp, his moustache perfectly curled. He held his small notebook, his neat handwriting filling the pages, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "Hastings," he said, looking up, "you sleep like a man." caught in a nightmare. But today, we end this. The clues, the letter, the vial, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the panel, the draft, the ink, they point to one truth. The killer is among us, and tonight we shall unmask them. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the unease. Poirot, the ink ties Clara to the smudge. Henry's furious about the will, Carver's to calm. Langston's got poisons, and Eliza's hiding her past. You've set traps before, but how will this one catch the killer? He smiled, his eyes twinkling. A final gathering, mon ami. We reveal the forged documents, nature, and watch the guilty crack under the weight of their lies. The motive greed, revenge, fear of exposure will show itself in their eyes, their hands, their words. Tonight, we close the net. I nodded, pulling on my jacket. The manor felt like a prison, its creaking floors and shadowy corners hiding a murderer. The letters, words, trust, broken, forged document, and the cyanide vial pointed to a calculated crime, one driven by a desperate need to control Ashford's legacy. Breakfast waited downstairs, and I braced myself for another tense meal, knowing Poirot's sharp eyes would catch every tremble. The dining room was silent, the air thick with dread. The tall windows let in pale grey light, making the silverware glint dully on the long table. Lady Eleanor Ashford sat at the head, her blonde hair pinned tightly, her face pale as she sipped tea, her spoon trembling slightly. Henry Ashford slouched across from her, his dark hair messy, picking at his eggs with a scowl. Clara Beaumont, the secretary, sat straight, her hands folded, but her fingers twitched nervously. Dr. Victor Langston ate quickly, his doctor's bag at his feet, his jaw tight. Margaret Poole, the housekeeper, brought in fresh coffee, her face tired but her eyes sharp. James Carver leaned back, smoking a cigarette, his smirk hiding something dark. Eliza Thornton, the maid, poured juice with shaky hands, jumping when Henry snapped at her to hurry. Inspector Japp was there, gulping coffee and flipping through his notebook. He looked up as we sat down. "Morning, Poirot. The lab says the ink matches Clara's typewriter, but no forged document yet. Your traps are stirring them, up Clara's jumpy, Henry's a mess. What's the plan?" Poirot spread butter on his toast with care. "Tonight, Japp, we gather them in the drawing room. I shall reveal the truth of the forged document and the killer's motive. The guilty will betray themselves, watch their faces." I grabbed my notebook, my stomach growling despite the grim mood. As I ate, I watched the others. Lady Eleanor's spoon clinked against her cup, her eyes red. Henry glared at her, his jaw tight. Clara's eyes flicked to Henry, then away. Dr. Langston glanced at Margaret, who looked down. James blew smoke rings, but his foot tapped under. The table. Eliza nearly spilled the juice when Japp asked for more coffee. They were all on edge, and I wondered how Poirot's final trap would break them. After breakfast, Poirot spent the morning in the study, examining the desk yet again. The pen, the smudge, the hidden panel, and the locked box where the draft will was found seemed to draw him like a magnet. He knelt by the desk, his fingers tracing the smudge on the blotter. "This ink," he said, "it is the key. Clara's typewriter, yes, but the document it forged, what was it? Not the will, I think, but something else." I frowned, scribbling in my notebook. "Not the will, but the draft," said Henry couldn't be trusted. "Oui," Poirot said, "but the letter spoke of a forged document, a betrayal. I believe it was a contract, perhaps tied to Monsieur Carver's failed deal. We must find it. We searched the study again, checking every drawer, shelf, and hidden corner. Behind a heavy book on the shelf, History of the Ashford Family, Poirot found a folded paper, its edges crumpled. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a contract between Ashford and Carver, dated a month ago. The signature looked like Ashford's, but the ink was slightly off, a shade darker than the pen on the desk. Mon Dieu, Poirot said. This is the forged document. The ink matches Clara's typewriter, but the signature it is not quite right. I gasped. A forged contract. So Carver was cheated. Or did he forge it? Poirot's mustache twitched. Perhaps neither. Someone used Clara's typewriter to forge this, to trick Ashford into a bad deal. When he discovered it, he wrote, "The letter to me, fearing betrayal." The killer silenced him before he could act. Jap, who'd joined us, peered at the contract. Blimey, Poirot, this points to Carver or Clara, but why kill over a contract? The motive, Poirot said, is not just money, but control. This contract would have ruined Carver's company, but Ashford's death stopped it. Or perhaps someone else gained by his silence. We must test them tonight. The day dragged on, with Poirot moving through the manor, his eyes sharp, his questions subtle. He spoke to each suspect, dropping hints about a document to gauge their reactions. In the library, Lady Eleanor clutched her handkerchief, her face pale. A contract. I don't know anything about Reginald's business. Henry, in the hall, scoffed. Carver's deal was a sham. He probably forged it to cheat Uncle Reginald. Clara, in her office, hesitated. I typed contracts for Lord Ashford, but I didn't forge anything. I swear, Dr. Langston, in the garden, gripped his bag. Business isn't my concern. I only treated Ashford. Margaret, in the kitchen, shook her head. I don't know about papers. I just served him. James Carver, on the terrace, smirked. A contract. Sounds like Ashford's paranoia. I didn't need to forge anything. Eliza, upstairs, blushed. I only cleaned his study. I didn't see any contracts. Poirot watched them all, his mind working like a clock. At lunch, the tension boiled over. Henry, his face flushed from whiskey, slammed his glass down. You're all liars, he shouted, pointing at Eleanor. She and Carver cooked this up to rob me of my inheritance. Eleanor stood, her voice icy. You're drunk, Henry. You're the one who lost everything. Clara touched Henry's arm. Please, stop. He shook her off, storming out. Poirot watched, his eyes narrow. The net tightens. Hastings, he murmured. The contract is the spark. That evening, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room for the final confrontation. The room was warm, with a fire crackling, but the mood was icy. The portraits glared down, the air thick with fear. Poirot stood by the fire, holding the contract, his voice calm but firm. I sat beside him, my notebook ready, my heart pounding. Lady Eleanor sat on a velvet sofa, her handkerchief twisted. Henry paced by the window, his face dark. Clara sat straight, her eyes down. Dr. Langston leaned against the mantel, his bag close. Margaret stood by the door, her hands clasped. James smoked, his eyes narrow. Eliza hovered in the corner, her apron twisted. Mies Amos, Poirot began. Tonight, we end this mystery. Lord Ashford was killed with cyanide in his brandy, in a study locked from the inside. A hidden panel allowed entry from the garden, where we found a vial of cyanide. A letter spoke of betrayal and a forged document. A draft will named Henry as untrustworthy. A pen, a smudge, a burned scrap with trust. They led us to this. He held up the contract, a forged contract, signed in Ashford's name, but written with Clara's typewriter ink. The room went still. Clara gasped, her hands trembling. I didn't forge it. I typed what he gave me. Henry rounded on her. You're lying. You wanted to help Eleanor steal everything. Eleanor stood. That's enough, Henry. I had nothing to do with it. Langston snorted. This is nonsense. You've got no proof. Margaret's hands shook. I don't know anything about contracts. James smirked, but his eyes were cold. Nice try, Poirot. That contract's real. Ashford signed it. Eliza burst into tears. I didn't do anything. I just found the letter. Poirot raised a hand. Silence, please. The contract was forged by someone who knew Ashford's habits, who used the hidden panel, who placed the vial to mislead us. The motive was to protect a secret, to secure the will. And the killer is Mademoiselle Clara Beaumont. Clara's face went white. No, that's not true. I loved Lord Ashford like a father. Poirot's voice was steady. You typed the contract, mademoiselle, using your typewriter. The ink matches the smudge. You knew the hidden panel as you worked near the study. You loved Henry, and when Ashford discovered the forgery, you feared he would expose you both. You poisoned his brandy using cyanide from Dr. Langston's supplies, which you accessed during your visits to his office. You burned part of the letter, but left the scrap. You took the handkerchief, fearing it pointed to you. Clara sobbed, collapsing into a chair. I didn't mean to. Henry was in debt, and the contract would have saved him. Ashford found out, and I panicked. I didn't want to kill him. Henry's jaw dropped. Clara, you did this. Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs ready. That's enough, Miss Beaumont. You're under arrest. The room erupted. Delanor gasped. Henry shouted. Langston cursed. Margaret cried. James stared. Eliza sobbed. Poirot remained calm, his eyes sad but resolute. The little grey cells, they see the truth. The letter, the vial, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the panel, the draft, the ink, they all spoke. As Japp led Clara away, I sat back, my notebook trembling in my hands. Poirot, you did it, but how did you know it was her? The ink, Hastings, he said, and her fear. She took the handkerchief. She hesitated at every question. The motive was love, twisted by desperation. The forged contract was her work, to save Henry. But murder is never the answer. Back in our room, I sat by the fire. My notes, a jumble of clues and confessions. The manor was quiet now, the storm outside fading. The suspects' faces lingered. Delanor's relief, Henry's shock, Clara's tears, Langston's coldness, Margaret's duty, Carver's calm, Eliza's panic. The killer was caught, but the cost was heavy. Poirot settled in his chair, his hands steepled. The truth is a heavy thing, Hastings, but it is found in the details, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the vial, the letter, the panel, the draft. The ink, they told the story. I lay in bed, the manor silent, the wind gone. The case was solved, but Ashford's death left a shadow. Poirot's net had closed, and justice was done. Chapter 12. Shadows of Justice. The 10th morning at Ashford Manor dawned with a fragile calm. The sky clearing to reveal a pale blue, the that seemed almost out of place after days of gloom. The wind had died down, leaving the gardens quiet, but the weight of Lord Reginald Ashford's murder lingered in the air like a stubborn fog. I woke with a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The memory of Clara Beaumont's tearful confession in the drawing-room the night before etched in my mind. The hidden letter, the cyanide vial, the misplaced pen, the ink smudge, the burned scrap with trust, the draft will, the forged contract, and the typewriter's ink had all led to her. The case was solved, but the manor felt hollow, its secrets exposed, but its wounds still raw. Hercule Poirot, my friend, was already up, standing by the window of our guest room. His suit crisp, his moustache perfectly curled, he gazed out at the roses, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes thoughtful. "Hastings," he said, turning to me, "you sleep like a man who has seen justice done, yet feels its cost. The case is closed, mon ami, but the heart of Ashford Manor still beats with pain. Today we tie the loose ends and bid farewell to this house of secrets." I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the heaviness. Poirot, Clara's confession, shocked me. She killed for love, to save Henry from his debts. But what happens now? And what about the others, Eleanor, Henry, Eliza? They're all broken by this. He nodded, his eyes softening. Justice is not a clean thing, Hastings. It reveals truth, but leaves scars. Clara will face the law, and the others must face their lives. The letter, the vial, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the panel, the draft, the contract, the ink they told the story. Now we ensure no questions remain. I pulled on my jacket, my mind racing. The manor's oppressive air seemed lighter. Now, but the faces of the suspects, Eleanor's shock, Henry's rage, Clara's tears, Langston's coldness, Margaret's duty, Carver's calm, Eliza's panic still haunted me. Breakfast waited downstairs, and I braced myself for a final meal with the household. Knowing it would be somber, the dining room was quieter than ever, the long table set with simple fare toast, eggs, and tea. The tall windows let in soft light, but the silverware gleamed dully, as if reflecting the mood. Lady Eleanor Ashford sat at the head, her blonde hair loose for the first time, her face pale but composed. Henry Ashford was absent, likely nursing his grief and anger in his room. Dr. Victor Langston ate slowly, his doctor's bag at his feet, his eyes distant. Margaret Poole brought in fresh coffee, her face lined with exhaustion but her movements steady. James Carver leaned back, smoking a cigarette, his smirk gone, replaced by a tired frown. Eliza Thornton poured juice, her hands steadier now, but her eyes were red from crying. Clara was gone, taken to the village jail by Japp's men. Inspector Japp sat with us, sipping tea and closing his notebook. He looked up as we joined him. "Morning, Poirot. Clara's in custody, and her confessions solid. The forged contracts being examined, but it's enough to convict her. You pulled it off again." Poirot spread butter on his toast with care. "Merci, Japp, but the case was not mine alone. The clues spoke: the letter, the vial, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the panel, the draft, the contract, the ink. They pointed to Mademoiselle Beaumont's desperate act. Yet we must ensure all is clear." I grabbed my notebook, my appetite small despite the long night. As I sipped tea, I watched the others. Eleanor's hands were steady, but her lips trembled. Langston avoided everyone's gaze. Margaret moved silently, her eyes on the floor. Carver's cigarette burned low, his face grim. Eliza's hands shook slightly as she poured. The absence of Clara and Henry hung over the table like a shadow. After breakfast, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing-room for a final meeting. The room was warm, with a fire crackling in the hearth, but the mood was heavy. The portraits of stern Ashfords seemed to watch with approval, as if justice had satisfied them. Poirot stood by the fire, his hands clasped, his voice calm but firm. I sat beside him, my notebook ready, my heart heavy. Eleanor sat on a velvet sofa, her handkerchief folded neatly. Henry had been persuaded to join, slumping in a chair, his face pale. Langston leaned against the mantel, his bag close. Margaret stood by the door, her hands clasped. Carver smoked, his eyes narrow. Eliza hovered in the corner, her apron smooth. Mise, Amos, Poirot began. The murder of Lord Ashford is solved. Mademoiselle Clara Beaumont confessed to poisoning his brandy with cyanide, driven by love for Monsieur Henry and fear of exposure. She forged a contract to secure funds for Henry's debts, using her typewriter, which left the ink smudge on the blotter. When Ashford discovered the forgery, he wrote a letter to me, speaking of betrayal. Clara used the hidden panel to enter the study, poisoned the brandy, and burned part of the letter. Leaving the scrap with Trust, she placed the cyanide vial in the garden to mislead us, and took the handkerchief with C, fearing it pointed to her. The draft will, the pen, the panel, they all confirmed her guilt. Eleanor's voice was soft. Why, Mr. Poirot, why did she do it? For love, Poirot said, and desperation. Monsieur Henry's debts were crushing, and the forged contract would have saved him. But Ashford's discovery threatened ruin. She acted to protect him, but love twisted into murder. Henry's face crumpled. I didn't know, he said, his voice hoarse. I never asked her to do this. I loved her, but I failed her. Langston cleared his throat. Her access to my supplies. How did she get the cyanide? Poirot's eyes were sharp. You were careless, Doctor. Your bag was often left. In the hall, where Clara worked, she took a small amount, enough to kill. Margaret's hands trembled. She was so quiet, so kind. I never suspected. Carver blew a smoke ring, his voice low. The contract wasn't my idea. I thought Ashford signed it willingly. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. She helped me, Mr. Poirot. She knew I was his niece, but she never told. Why did she do this? Poirot's voice softened. Fear, mademoiselle. Fear of losing everything. But justice is done. Japp nodded. Clara's trial will be quick. The evidence is clear contract, vile confession. You've done your part, Poirot. Poirot raised a hand. One moment, Japp. There are loose ends. Madame Eleanor, will stands you inherit the estate. But I urge you to care for Monsieur Henry and Mademoiselle Eliza. They are family, Nan. Eleanor nodded, her eyes wet. I will, Mr. Poirot. Reginald would have wanted it. Henry looked up, his voice broken. I don't deserve it. Not after this. You will heal, Poirot said. And Mademoiselle Eliza, your secret is safe. You are Ashford's niece, and this house is your home. Eliza sobbed, nodding. Thank you, sir. Poirot turned to Carver. Monsieur, your business is safe now, but beware of greed. It destroys. Carver shrugged, his smirk gone. I've learned my lesson. To Langston, Poirot said, your supplies must be guarded, Doctor. Negligence can kill. Langston nodded, his face grim. I understand. To Margaret, he said, your loyalty was true, madame. You served well. Margaret's eyes glistened. I only did my duty. Poirot stepped back, his hands clasped. The case is closed. The clues, the letter, the vial, the pen, the smudge, the scrap, the panel, the draft, the contract, the ink have spoken. Justice is served, but let us remember the cost. The room was silent, the fire crackling softly. The suspects left, one by one, their faces heavy with grief, relief, or shame. I sat back, my notebook full, my heart aching. Poirot, I said, you solved it, but it feels so sad. Clara loved Henry, and now she's lost everything. Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. Love can be a poison, Hastings, as deadly as cyanide, but the truth heals, even if it hurts. The little grey cells, they see what the heart hides. We spent the afternoon packing, the manor quiet now, its secrets laid bare. Japp's men had left, taking Clara to face her trial. Eleanor met with the solicitor to settle the estate, promising to support Henry and Eliza. Henry stayed in his room, wrestling with his guilt. Langston packed his bag, planning to leave for London. Margaret bustled about, her duty unbroken. Carver booked a train, his business plans in tatters. Eliza cleaned the study, her tears dry at last as we walked to the car. The gardens glowed in the soft light, the roses no longer ominous. Poirot paused, looking back at the manor. A house of secrets, Hastings, but no more. The truth has set it free. I nodded, climbing into the car. You did it, Poirot. You always do, he smiled, settling beside me. Not I, mon ami, the clues did. The pen, the smudge, the scrap, the vial, the letter, the panel, the draft, the contract, the ink, they told the story. And now we go home. As the car rolled away, Ashford Manor shrank in the distance, its grey stone softened by the sun. The case was over, but its shadows lingered, a reminder that truth comes at a price.